Okay, and we are live. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be in
And
the
I'm
Daniel tonight in Tanakh. We're going to go read through. We're going to discuss some commentary and see what we can glean from it. So, if you're watching and you want to join, just go ahead and send one of us a message or comment that you'd like a link, and we can maybe see about doing that for you. Okay, I will go ahead and read the first chapter. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, and some of the vessels of the house of God into his hand, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and the vessels he brought to the treasury of his God. Then the king said to Ashpenaz, his chief officer, to bring from the children of Israel, from the royal seed and from the nobles. I can't read. Wow. Youths in whom there is no blemish, of handsome appearance, who understand all wisdom, who are erudite in knowledge, and who understand how to express their thoughts, and who have strength to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the script and the language of the Chaldeans. The king allotted them a daily portion of the king's food, of the wine that he drank, and to train them for 3 years, and at the end thereof they would stand before the king. Now there were among them from the Judahites Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the chief officer gave them names. He called Daniel Belshazzar, Hananiah Shadrach, Mishael Meshach, and Azariah Abednego. Daniel resolved not to be defiled by the king's food or by the wine he drank, so he requested of the king's chief officer that he should not be defiled. God granted Daniel kindness and mercy before the chief officer. And the chief officer replied to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who allotted your food and your drink, for why should he see your faces troubled more than the youths like you? And you will forfeit my head to the king. And Daniel answered the steward, whom the chief officer had appointed for Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us some pulse that we should eat, and water that we should drink. And let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be seen by you, and as you will see, so do with your servants. He heeded them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days they looked handsomer and fatter than all the youths who ate the king's food. And the steward would carry away their food and the wine they were to drink and give them pulse. And to these youths, the 4 of them, God gave knowledge and understanding in every script and wisdom. And Daniel understood all visions and dreams. At the end of the days that the king had ordered to bring them, the chief officer brought them before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and all of them. No one was found to equal Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they stood before the king. And in every matter of the wisdom of understanding that the king requested of them, he found them 10 times better than all the necromancers and astrologers in his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. That ends chapter 1. It's kind of a basic introduction. Anybody have anything? Anything that jumps out at them?
Is this the only passage that speaks about kosher wine? Can't remember you talking about that before. Is this the only passage that speaks of it?
It briefly alludes to it in another chapter.
It alludes to what? I'm sorry.
The fact that Daniel and his companions would not eat the king's food or drink the non-kosher wine.
Let everybody else go before I bring what I have. Okay.
Go ahead.
Hit us, Ross.
Okay. This is really rich. Really rich. Nebuchadnezzar, in and around this time, this is when cuneiform writing was the form in all of this area. they spoke a language which you would call Akkadian. And that essentially comes back from the time of Nimrod when he had started several cities. One of those cities was Akkad, from which potentially would be the Akkadian language. Nebuchadnezzar, or in and about that time, was in the business of collecting the gods of all of the surrounding nations. And when he came to take from Israel, there were no idols per se, but he did manage to take the temple implements, which you find later on in the story. Jehoiachin was 25 years old when he started to reign, and he was placed on the throne by Pharaoh Necho, who had killed Jehoiachin's father in Megiddo and then buried his father in Jerusalem. The fact that it mentions that they were placed with the eunuchs, that was more or less foretold prior to this in 2 Kings chapter 20, verses 17 and 18. All in your house is gone, meaning the temple implements and his later descendants, which Daniel and the other three. As far as the name change, that is more or less a lot of what you're seeing here too is indoctrination, teaching them the Chaldean language. And Chaldean, by the way, at this point means intelligent or learned, educated. These are the scholars of the day, Chaldean. So he's changing their name, changing their diet, teaching them cuneiform form. I mean, he is just really inculcating these people into that society, that culture.
Assimilation.
Assimilation, right. I'll kind of stop there and let you sink some of that in, but go ahead.
Well, just for some of the historical context, this is during the Babylonian exile in what is now Iraq.
Right.
Is there a more profound reason why the king started giving them these names? Is there any custom among the Chaldeans of the time to do that, or is it more like the Romans did, and after that, that they try to give them citizenship with the name? Well, what did he mean when he gave them a new name?
Well, because I mean, ancient Babylonian, Chaldean, Neo-Babylonian names are almost always associated with their deities, with their gods. So what he's doing is, okay, these Jews are a conquered people. I'm going to rename them, and this is how it was done back then. You assimilated people. You forced them to become you, basically.
In a way, it actually reminds me of a perversion of God's custom regarding Abraham and Sarah. God changed the name of Abraham and Sarah to mark them as his, right? So it almost looks like the king of Babylon, he thought himself a god as well, right? Was trying to say to own them by changing their name.
Yeah, in a similar vein, yeah. Yep.
Cultures and religions to this day, if you convert, will assign you a different name, even today.
a Christianing name, for example, among the Christians, there's the christening, right? Many Christian families still use that and have like a second name that's the name you get when you're baptized and so forth, or when you do the christening. I don't remember.
Sure. In the Catholic Church, if a woman joins the nunnery, she gets a sister so and so name that's not her real name, but they'll rename her.
Hmm.
So she doesn't have any resemblance of her past life. Yes.
Right.
It
It
has
just
something of a rebirth element, right, to it.
it's just total indoctrination. Uh, Giving them his food, his drink, teaching them to read, to write, to speak, and change their name. I mean, he is totally trying to erase um, any identity that they have and just totally indoctrinate or, yeah, and pull them into his culture or that culture.
And it's interesting that is, and it's interesting that it's actually a very smart move in political, not in a moral sense, but in a political sense, because from what it seems, Daniel was already an important figure at that time. He was a very erudite man. So it almost looked like the king is saying, I want this province to join the empire. I want it to be part of the empire. So I'm going to get the greater minds of these people. I am going to convince them that our way is the best way, and so that they can promote our policy, our way of life among their own people. Kind of like rotting an important root to rot the entire tree.
Right. He's using, that's exactly why he targeted Daniel and his friends, was because he knew that these individuals exhibited some level of intelligence, higher intelligence, and that's exactly why he wanted them singled out and brought in for this teaching, this training. And by doing so, again, you're right. He is trying to fortify, reinforce his own
and out, but I had the volume up and I'll be tuning in as best I can.
All right, no problem. Glad you could join us either way.
Glad you got the message.
Yeah, and that was the Babylonian exile, at least in its beginning. It was entirely an exile of the elite of Jewish society. They did not take the common people or the peasants away to Babylon. They took the kings, they took priests, they took the scholars, that type of thing. It wasn't until much later that they started deporting regular everyday people.
in one perspective, it's like, if I take their leaders, then the followers will have nowhere else to go. I have said repeatedly over the course of time that it's a different version of what Rome did. When Rome left Israel, they destroyed the temple, burnt the scrolls, killed the prophets, priests, and anybody and everybody that was associated, to try to obliterate that memory and leave them essentially uh, leaderless, and they would be more in a position to manipulate their captives.
And it's funny how that tactic has actually been refined over time. Because like, if you look at how Babylonians did it, they basically took the leaders and tried to assimilate them so that they could have enough, have a way to help assimilate the nation itself. The Romans did a brutal, brutal response, like destroy the past, and try to make them leaderless and thus unable to organize. The Christians, on the other hand, did a much more subtle action. They didn't try to destroy the leaders. They tried to convert them through their wives, and with that convert the rest of the population. They try to make the indigenous rulers agents to their philosophy. So it seems kind of like a revolution of the Babylonian original.
Variation, yes.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for chapter 1? No? Okay. Do I have a volunteer to read for chapter 2?
I'll do it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, chapter 2. Let's see. Here we go. Let's scroll back up. I started reading. Now, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep was interrupted. And the king commanded to summon the necromancers, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. And they came and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I dreamed a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we shall tell you the interpretation. The king replied and said to the Chaldeans, the matter has escaped me. If you do not let me know the dream and its meaning, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be made into a dung heap. But if you tell the dream and its meaning, you will receive gifts and lavish presents and great honor from me. But tell me the dream and its meaning. They replied a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we shall tell the meaning. The king replied and said, in truth, I know that this time you are doomed, because you see that the matter has escaped me. For if you do not tell me the dream, there is but one law for you, or if you have prepared yourselves to say before me a false and corrupt word until the time changes. But tell me the dream, and I shall know that you will tell me its meaning. The Chaldeans replied before the king and said, there is no man on earth who can declare the king's word, because no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any necromancer, astrologer, or Chaldean. And the matter that the king asks is difficult, and there is no other who can tell it before the king but the angels, whose dwelling is not with this people. In view of this, the king was in great wrath and anger, and ordered to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And a decree was issued, and the wise men were being slain, and Daniel and his colleagues were sought to be slain. Then Daniel answered with counsel and good sense to Arioch, the king's chief executioner, who had gone out to slay the wise men of Babylon. He replied and said to Arioch, the king's ruler, why was the decree issued so hastily from before the king? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel. Then Daniel entered and requested of the king that time be given him, and the interpretation would be told to the king. Then Daniel went home, and his colleagues Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah know of the matter, and to pray and beg the God of heaven about this secret, that Daniel and his colleagues should not perish with the remaining wise men of Babylon. The secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel spoke up and said, may the name of God be blessed from everlasting to everlasting, to whom are wise and might. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes the kings and sets up kings. He grants wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who know understanding. He reveals the profound and secret things. He knows what is in the dark, and light dwells with him. To you, O God of my forefathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and now you have let me know what I requested of you. For the matter of the king, you have let me know. In view of this, Daniel came to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I shall tell the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought Daniel in before the king in haste. And so he said to him, that I have found a man of the exiles of Judea who will let the king know the interpretation. The king spoke up and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, sorry, do you have the ability to tell me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king and said, the secret that the king asks, no wise men, astrologer, necromancers, or demonologists can tell the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he lets King Nebuchadnezzar know what will be at the end of days. That is your dream and the visions of your head on your bed. You, O king, your thoughts came while on your bed. That will be after this. And the revealer of secrets lets you know what will be. And I, not with wisdom that I possess more than all living, did he reveal the secret to me, but in order that they should let the king know the interpretation, and you should know the thoughts of your heart. O king, you were watching, and behold, one great image, an image which had a large base and with unusual splendor was standing opposite you, and its form was frightening. That image had head of fine gold, its breasts and arms were of silver, its bellies and thighs were of copper, its legs were iron, and its feet were partly of iron and partly clay. You were watching until one stone was hewn without hands, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and crumbled them. Then the iron, the clay, the copper, the silver, and the gold crumbled together, and they were like chaff from the threshing floors of summer. And the wind carried them off, and no place was found for them. And the stone that struck the image became a huge mountain and filled the entire earth. This is the dream, and its interpretation we shall recite before the king. You, O king, king of kings, the God of heaven gave you a strong, powerful, and prominent kingdom. And wherever people, wild beasts, and birds of the sky dwell, he has given into your hand and has given you dominion over them all. You are the head of gold. And after you will arise another kingdom lower than you, and another, a third kingdom of copper, which will rule over the entire earth. And a fourth kingdom will be strong as iron, for iron crumbles and flattens everything. And like iron, which shatters all these, it will crumble and shatter. And what you saw, the feet and the toes, which were partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, so it will be a divided kingdom, and in it will be some of the strength of iron, in view of what you saw, iron mixed with clay. And the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, for the part of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be broken. And what you saw, iron mixed with clay, connotes that they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave one to another, as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom forever. It will not be destroyed, and the kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crumble and destroy all these kingdoms, and it will stand forever. Just as you saw that from the mountain a stone was hewn out of hands, and it crumbled the iron, the copper, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great God has let the king know what will be after this, and the dream is true, and its interpretation is reliable. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and prostrated himself before Daniel, and he ordered to offer up a meal offering and libations to bring him satisfaction. The king replied to Daniel and said, truly, your God is the God of gods and the master of kings, and he reveals secrets, that being that you were able to reveal this secret. The king then elevated Daniel and gave him many great gifts and gave him dominion over all the capital cities of Babylon. And he was the chief prefect over all the wise men in Babylon. And Daniel requested of the king, and he appointed over the affairs of the capital cities of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel was in the king's gate. So, end chapter 2.
Wow, that one is jam-packed.
That is epic.
You bet it is.
I actually know some things that people in the Middle Ages thought about that. Translatio Imperii, they called it. The idea that this empire of Nabucodonosor, I don't know how to say it in English. Sorry, is was then given to the Romans, and from the Romans it was given to the Byzantines, and or the Holy Roman Empire. One thought or the other, and after that it collapsed, and people thought that someone else got the empire, and it came to this day. There's a lot of talk of the Roman Empire being this in the Middle Ages. They said a lot about that. And I find it funny how the polytheistic mindset is different from the monotheistic mindset. Because I was a polytheist, so I kind of, when I look at Nabucodonosor's answer, it kind of makes me giggle a bit because I see how he doesn't get it. Because when a monotheist sees something like what Daniel did, he would think, "Oh, this is God. God is all the other gods are fake and are lies, and this is the real God and all that." But when a polytheist sees something like that, he would think like, "Oh, so this is the king of the gods," and he wouldn't really get that there is only one God. It wouldn't really enter his mind. He would just see it as the king of the gods, the greatest of gods, the God of gods. It's kind of funny to see that in action.
Brother Lee, you got anything?
Nope, because I'm going to let you talk.
All right. Well, there's a that actually goes like Nebuchadnezzar, and then it was Media Persia, the left and the right, Media, and then Persia. Then it falls to the Greek, the Greco third phase, and then the last phase was actually the Roman Empire, which was split in two, which is representative of the two legs, east and west. And then it eventually uh, diverges down to the 10 toes, and then the clay and iron. A lot of people will say that that is Christianity and Islam coexisting but not intermingling, always clashing. Then you have Daniel rising to a position of prominence. Harken back to Joseph coming out of the dungeon and being elevated. This king rewarded Daniel richly. Then you have the jealousy factor. All of the other necromancers, magicians, and so forth see this foreigner come in and get elevated to second in command, and jealousy ensues. Uh, Again, you were right. Nebuchadnezzar, he's looking at this from a polytheistic point of view, the God of gods, and he lets his ego get the better of him. Um, this eventually will go to his head, him being the King of Kings or the first of all kings or whatever. This will eventually go to his head. Daniel, right out of the gate here, if you didn't catch it, attributes all of this, the dream, the interpretation, the wisdom. He attributes everything to God. Straight up, he says, "Ain't none of this me. I'm no smarter than anybody else here. So what you're getting is from God." Um, let's see what else was in here.
It kind of shows
Ah,
also the duality, the difference between a God fearing prophet and a magician, right?
yes, yes,
Because a God fearing prophet says, God, I'm nothing, I'm just a servant of God. While a magician says, I'm going to find out what you need, I'm going to force the dead to talk to me, I'm going to make this be known. It's a very different from an egocentric viewpoint and a selfless viewpoint.
sure, sure. Those are being contrasted here as well. Then you have the, see, there was another element here. Feel free to interrupt me at any point.
Daniel sounds a lot like Joseph.
Ah, yes, yes. Um, Raised up to a very high position,
Was in
richly rewarded,
was in
interpreting
jail.
dreams. Huh?
Was in jail.
Daniel wasn't really in jail at this point.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe house arrest until the executioner came along, but he really wasn't in prison per se.
Okay.
And let's see what else. Gab, jump in anytime, man. I know you've got some stuff here.
No. Keep on going. I'm in the middle of feeding little guy. So
Okay. Um,
Hello,
well,
little guy. That's all I
yeah,
have.
hello.
James, I posted the link down for you where we're at online if you want it.
But
Thank you. Appreciate that. I got my JPS open. That's good. Good.
Okay.
so you got a whole bunch of things taking place. You've got Daniel's humility, the king's ego, along with the magicians and necromancers, their ego. Now there's this jealousy factor being set in. They've Daniel's drawn attention to himself, not because he wanted to, but now they're looking at him. Who does this guy think he is? Come in here. And then there's
And,
also an element of the Esther Mordecai story here too.
he is doing it to save people. It's funny, like Daniel isn't really. He didn't actually start doing anything until the king threatened to kill everyone. Like he didn't try to become this great person in the kingdom. He just like had to save his life, and it was only out of the grace of God.
Yeah. Daniel never had the intention to draw attention to himself in any way, shape, form, or fashion. He was just more or less put in that position and he had to deal with it. He really was forced to deal with it. James, you got anything or are you still with us?
Nope, he's running back and forth.
Okay.
It also kind of seems like he is showing he is being humbled like Moses was, almost like the flip side of Moses when Moses came in and was second in command, and then he became humbled so he could do the interpretations
Right.
just before the 10 plagues.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's this story just ties so many things together. Egypt, multiplicity of gods or pantheon of gods, humility, humbleness, dreams,
And
interpretations.
in a
Go ahead.
and in a way, it also shows the Jewish people blessing in a way the Gentiles, because it's the second time that a Jew is solving a problem for a pagan king, right? Joseph, like Rosalie said, had the same thing. It's a Jew helping a Gentile.
In some respects, I'd like to say yes, but again, um, I see it just a little bit differently in that Hashem chose those who acknowledged him from the beginning to set them apart. Now, Abraham came from an idolatrous family, we're told. His father made him, sold him, whatever, what size do you want? What, you want it out of copper, you want it out of iron, you want it out of stone. We got the cheap model over here, how we want engraving.
But wait,
But
there's more. Okay, never mind.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This one-time offer.
Yeah, we got a special on these granite ones over here. But it's just the fact that and the story goes on and on and on. It's not just Abraham. It's quite a few individuals.
Right.
God knows where these people are, every one of them. And don't lose sight of the fact that Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar was already there and in place, put there by God to take care, to be in the position, so that when Hashem said, "Look, you're not going to let the land rest. You haven't let it rest for 70 years. Now your captivity will last, or your exile here will last 70 years." Which Daniel even said at the end of chapter 1, he understood where he was on this time map because of the writings of Jeremiah. Jeremiah saw it coming, Isaiah saw it coming. And Daniel realized that this is where they are.
And that they will inevitably fall.
But again, I mean, Babylon was there. Nebuchadnezzar was there, all in advance and placed there by Hashem. So the the picture is partially there to show you the contrast between those that accept, worship, and follow Hashem rather than a pantheon or any other type of paganism. This is here for the story, the insight in contrast to show you the difference.
And it's interesting how the necromancers, they could not really tell Nebuchadnezzar what was his dream. It shows in a way how no matter what you think about these things, the picture that they can make will ultimately be failed, will be a unprecise, unreliable, or downright untrue. And it kind of makes a stark contrast with Daniel. While the necromancers were eager to please, eager to say, eager to give the king whatever answer he wanted, but they couldn't because the king gave them an unreasonable request, like know exactly what I saw without me saying it. The Daniel didn't want to do any of that, and he just did it because he had to. And because God was with him, he could actually do that. He could actually say exactly what he saw without him saying it. There's a lot of contrast in this chapter, like you said.
Sure. Ego, humility, paganism, and then being a God-fearer. There's a lot of contrast here. If you just read the surface story, you miss a lot of the background. And I've always tried to look behind what's going on here.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you. James, you back or Gab, you got anything? What do you wanna do? Still feeding, I guess.
I don't have anything at the moment. If you want to continue, you certainly can. If you have any questions or anything, I'm still here. I'm trying to be as quiet as possible.
But yeah, just look behind it. I mean, understand here that all of these other magicians, uh, stargazers, I mean, he's got the whole gamut here. Astrologers, soothsayers, tarot card readers. He's got the whole gamut at his disposal, and they're all just standing around saying, "I got nothing, boss. I got nothing." Right?
And the funny thing is how Daniel was able to say something in a way that was subtle. Like, uh, Nebuchadnezzar wanted an answer because he was afraid about the dream, right? Well, his reaction was very frustrated. Like, I will kill every wise man in the city because they didn't give me an answer. So, like, he was afraid what all these things breaking down meant, that it would be the end of his empire, the end of his reign. And Daniel was able to kind of confirm that without actually making him angry. He like said, "Oh, the head of gold, it's you. You're the head of gold. You're the one who is up there in gold. And then you're gonna lose everything, and there's gonna be this other kingdom and this other kingdom." But he was like transfixed on the first part of it, like, "Oh, you are the head of gold." It shows something of a blind eye, a blindness in pride, that he was able to feel so happy that Daniel was saying that he was identified with this golden head, and not think that afterward he was saying that all of it will crumble.
Right. That's why I say Nebuchadnezzar's ego just got a major boost here. You know, he heard the head of gold. I think he stopped listening after that point.
Definitely.
And then, like I said, the other guys saw what's going on. Here's your jealousy factor coming in. And that's exactly why they set up the little plot later on that we're going to hear about.
It has a lot of moral content to it. The idea how your ego can create and make you see things wrongly, and how a person that is humble can see it clearly.
That, again, plays out in a lot of places, story after story after story. And I've said for some time now that if you really want to know what the worst form of idolatry is, what is the first letter in that word?
I.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I only actually noticed this. It's interesting because, like I said, I used to be a polytheist, and when you're a polytheist, you don't really think about these things. You don't really. It's a different way of seeing the world, and it creates a view of the world that is a lot more nihilistic. So when you say that idolatry also includes you being self-focused, you only focusing on yourself, you're being egotistic, you're being egocentric, you you making something be between you and God, and you actually feel worried that something is between you and God. That is a completely different mindset, and it frees you from everything. So if you're a polytheist, you look at the what you think are gods, and you see it much as a transactional thing. Oh, you're gonna do something for them, they're gonna do something for you, and you all have cake. You know, it's nihilistic. It has no substance to it. But when you're talking about God, it's carnal. It's like, I don't want anything between us. I was actually talking to God about the halachic sex. You are not permitted to have any clothes on when you have sexual relationship with your wife if you are Jewish, and that just hit me now. It's carnal in a way. You cannot have anything between you and God. You cannot have anything at all between you and God, and that frees you from everything else. To this day, I have a polytheistic friend. My best friend is a polytheist, and he doesn't understand it. He says, "You guys seem like slaves because you have so many rules to follow." But when I look at Jews, I don't see slaves. A people that can go look in the eye of a tyrant and say, I don't bow to you, is not a slave. A people that can face death and say, I am not going to bow to this, is not a slave. And how can they do that? The the only thing I see that makes this possible is the fact that they do not they try as much as possible. No one is perfect, of course, but they try as much as possible to not have anything between them and God. And if you don't have anything between you and God, you have nothing that is holding you other than God.
Well, look at it this way. A lot of people that have these idols, if you will, we'll try to think in the conventional sense, some representation of some form that represents a quote unquote God. Now, the Romans had several. Bacchus was the god of wine. They would celebrate the god of wine so that, oh, make us have a successful grape production so that we can make more wine. And then there was Mithras, which was essentially their sun god. And this Mithras predates JC by quite a bit. And again, this story was told over and over and over. Born on December 25th, died, resurrected, 12 followers. It's just the story was all over the place. JC was the latest guy that was stuck into that template, pre-existing template. But anyway, you're out on the sea, there's rough seas, old Neptune, give us calm waters, right? In one sense, you're praying to all these gods to serve you, to give you what you want. Here, the contrast, the other side, the flip side of the picture is, I don't need anything, God. You got this. I'm here to serve you.
Amen.
It always seems that Judaism is not trying to destroy the ego, but trying to integrate it to the greater whole. Because it's a difference between Judaism and Buddhism. Buddhism is nihilism. Buddhism is death. Basically, stop feeling, stop being, just sink into the nothingness. That is death. It's nihilist. Judaism, no. Judaism isn't trying to remove the self, but it's trying to make the self be part of the holy whole, the holy in the sense of holiness, whole. And it's beautiful how that works. Like it reminds me of a person saying I heard saying one day, you shouldn't do something because it's good, it's right. You should do it because God ordered you to. In the sense, you shouldn't not murder because it is wrong to murder. You should not murder because God said you shouldn't murder. And at first I thought that strange. Not strange as bad, but strange as why. But then I thought if you didn't kill somebody or didn't steal because it's the right thing to do, you're doing that to feel like you're a good man. You're doing that to feel like you're good. So you're doing that for yourself. Even when you're doing something good, you're doing it to feel better about yourself. But when you do it because God ordered you to, you are just doing that because He ordered you to. It completely encapsulates the self in God. It makes your action not be something that puts your name up, but puts the name of God up. And that's the biggest contrast I see between Judaism and any other religion in the world. It does not focus on me.
When you do it because God said so, that's when you serve God.
Yes. And before we get too far off topic, Ross or Victor, would you like to read chapter 3?
Sure, I can, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Get this in a little better light here. There we go. Nebuchadnezzar, the king. I have a slightly different version, and I'm reading from that version. Caused to be made an image of gold. Ah, there's the gold again. The head of gold, whose weight was 60 cubits, or 90 feet in its breadth, 6 cubits, or 9 feet, 9 feet wide. 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the satraps, the deputies, the governors, the judges, the chief stargazers, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, the lawyers, and all the chiefs of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had caused to be set up. Then the satraps, the deputies, governors, judges, chiefs, stargazers, treasurers, uh, and all the officials of the provinces were gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. They stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald cried aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages." Curious the way that's worded. That when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, dulcimer, or bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship that, or worship, shall that very hour be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the dulcimer, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, at that time, certain men of Chaldean descent came near and brought malicious accusations against the Jews. Surprise, surprise. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever." Play to his ego. "You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the pipe, worship the golden image, and that whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed and set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up." Oh, Haman's just upset that Mordecai will not bow. Let me turn this phone call off. Okay, sorry about that. Then Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image which I've set up? Now, if if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, trigon, harp, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image which I have made, very good. But if you do not worship, you will be cast at once into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God who can deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, it is not necessary for us to answer you on this point. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and his facial expression was changed to antagonism against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he commanded that the furnace should be heated 7 times hotter than it was usually heated. And he commanded the strongest men in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these 3 men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, or undergarments, their turbans, and their other clothing, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame and the sparks from the fire killed those men who handled Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king saw and was astounded, and he jumped up and said to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered, True, O king. He answered, Behold, I see 4 men loose and walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, the deputies, the governors, king's counselors gathered around together and saw these men, that the fire had no power upon their bodies, nor was the hair upon their heads singed, neither were their garments scorched, or changed in color or condition, nor had even the smell of smoke clung to them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who believed in him. And they set aside the king's command and yielded their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, and language that speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses made a dunghill. And there is no other God who can deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. I'll take it. Hello?
Yeah, you're still there.
Hello.
See, we've got 3 more verses to go, so I'll go ahead
Yes.
and read those. King Nebuchadnezzar said to all peoples, nations, and tongues that dwell in the whole earth, may your welfare increase. The signs and wonders that the Most High God has done with me, it behooves me to recite. How great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom, and his dominion is with every generation. Okay.
I'm sorry,
This is so
my
good.
version ended there.
That's okay.
It happens. It's interesting how this reminds me a lot of Christianity, in the sense that you notice that Nebuchadnezzar, uh, he was impressed by the God of Daniel, yet he confused him and thought him to be something else. He then made the God of Daniel his own in a way, adopted him, but did so in his own tradition. And he started trying to force people to follow it in his own view. And when the Jews said, "This is not the way, this image is not our God," he wanted to burn them alive. It's like he tried to appropriate the Jewish God and got angry when he saw that the Jews didn't follow him. And at the same time, you still see the same polytheistic trend. When he almost said something that looked monotheistic in the end, but he didn't. He said that no God can save like him, and there's no God as high. You see, he's very careful not to actually say that he is the only God, even though he's very impressed by him.
I see that just slightly different than what you're expressing. It's think back to Abraham. You know, he wakes up one day and he's got what, a warehouse full of gods, and then he comes up one day and says, "This no, there's only one God, one real God." And then you have a situation, Jethro. I don't know how familiar you are with this particular character, but apparently he knew of all the various types of gods in that day, and whether he cataloged them or worshiped them or was just you know conversant in their who they were. So I mean, I always said Jethro was a Midianite merchant, and he had to go into different lands: Midian, Egypt, Canaan, whatever. And he had to know who the local gods were so he wouldn't do anything to offend them. It's preservation more than it was just out of flat out worship. But then again, he may have, who knows, you know. But over and over, you see the story of people coming to the realization. Pharaoh with Joseph. Now I know. Okay. So yeah, he's stepping away from it, and he is making a declaration that, you know, only there's only one God that could ever do such a thing. So he's coming to the realization.
But it's slow.
Yeah, it's slow. You don't just snap your finger. But again, too, he does say that anybody who doesn't worship their God, you're going to be chopped up, diced up. Your house will become a dunghill, and
But the
so
word he says isn't anyone who says evil of it, anyone who tries to say anything against the god. He says worship as well.
my
Let me see.
translation says anyone that says anything amiss against the God.
Uh-huh.
So what he's in
Yeah,
some
the same thing is
sense,
here too.
yeah, in he's more or less expanding upon what is already out there, not to blaspheme. Now he's saying you shouldn't say anything derogatory whatsoever.
It's interesting to see this because it reflects a lot of how my wife evolved into monotheism as well. Uh, she was also a polytheist like me, and she saw me convert to the Jewish belief. I'm not a Jew, of course, but I converted to the Jewish belief, and everything started getting better with us, and everything started getting good. And it seemed that she actually had the same process. She was like, at first, she was like, well, it seemed that the Jewish God is the strongest of the gods, the best God ever, the greatest God. He is doing something that no other God ever did for us. But it was very much like that. Like, I'm not saying there isn't any other ones. I'm just saying that this one is the best. And it slowly evolved to her understanding that there was no other gods. So it's fine to see this reaction to Nabucodonosor because it really shows an understanding of the pagan mindset in this, because it's not something that you would write. A Christian wouldn't write this. That's what I mean. Like, if you're in a medieval time writing this, you would not understand their viewpoint in this way, and you would not be able to actually show this type of reaction because it's something very particular to a polytheist.
Boy, is that an understatement.
But again, here, don't lose sight of the fact that the satraps, the governors, the law enforcement agent, everybody, all of the officials got to see this happen. Now, the plot doesn't stop here. Now they're more enraged than ever. They tried it, they failed, and now they've got to be slick, sly, and cunning to figure out how they're going to get these guys in trouble without saying anything against their God.
So they had to find a different mean
Tactic.
in which to do that. Yes.
A different tactic.
I still find it interesting how I don't know if it's going to continue that way. From what you're saying, that Nebuchadnezzar slowly gets to a realization of the one true God. But until this point, until the end of this point, it always seemed to me like he was doing some form of projection. Because of the golden idol, the fact that he is described as a king of gold, it always looked as if, and the way he got angry, completely angry of someone not venerating the god statue, and how the authorities actually phrased it in that manner, like they are not following your decree, they think little of you for a while when they're not doing that. So they weren't really saying like these guys are not respecting your god. They were saying these guys are not respecting you. So in a way, it seems like, at least until this point, Nebuchadnezzar really saw himself in this God image that he made. And he was actually creating a parallel. The people will venerate this God because the people will venerate me.
Well, Daniel turned around and interpreted his dream, and the way he saw it in the dream, Daniel told him that he was the Godhead because he was made of gold. So of course he's going to make himself a statue of gold. His God said that's what it was, and so he made it happen. And in a way, it's like this whole thing starting to sound like Pharaoh during the 10 plagues and how he's hardened his heart.
Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar, that's why I'm saying his ego got him. He heard Daniel say, "You are the head of gold."
Yes, exactly.
So he said, "I'm going to have a whole statue made out of gold." You know,
That's right.
And a gigantic one for that.
Because where the head goes, the body follows. You got it.
And forget about this silver kingdom after me and the bronze kingdom and the I'm it, baby. Ain't nobody. I'm it. Ain't gonna be nobody after me.
He's living in the here and now.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And it all ties down to him. It all always returns to him. He was able to transform that into an ego boost. The veneration of the god became an ego boost. Because when they wanted to say that the Jews offended, they didn't offend the God, they offended him. These Jews aren't obeying you in venerating the God.
Well, it's the same thing with Pharaoh, with the Pharaoh in Egypt.
Yeah.
It seemed that a lot of, at least in the end of this chapter, it seemed like it will go to a lighter turn, because it seemed that he got an ego bruise and that like a realization in that moment. I said, it was good that you did not obey the king. He was like, he actually said like, oh, I was speaking out of a part of me that I shouldn't have been speaking. Like I was saying something wrong, and I shouldn't have tried to force you guys to do that. So
I
it
was,
seemed like he had a moment of realization.
he was being a bit impetuous.
Just a bit. Gav, can you talk now or no? James, if you're listening, you got anything?
Wow.
Well, Victor, why don't you go ahead and read chapter 4 then, okay?
Okay. Let me see if I can say his name right in English. Uh, I, Nebuchadnezzar,
Yay.
was tranquil in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream, and it frightened me, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my mind terrified me. So I issued an order to bring in before me all the wise men of Babylon, that they should let me know the meaning of the dream. Then the necromancers, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the demonologists entered, and I related my dream to them, but they did not tell me its meaning. Until at last Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, like the name of my God, okay, entered before me, in whom is the spirit of holy angels, and I told him the dream. O Belteshazzar, head of the necromancers, his view of this. Since I know that the spirit of the holy angels is in you, and no secret is hidden from you, this is the vision of my dream that I saw. Now tell me its interpretation. And these are the visions of my mind that I had on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was tremendous. The tree grew, and it became strong, and its height reached the sky, and its appearance was seen to the end of all the earth. Its branches were beautiful, and its fruit was plentiful, and on it was sustenance for all. Under it the beasts of the field took shade, and in its branches dwelt the birds of the heavens, and all flesh was nourished from it. I saw in the visions of my mind on my bed, and behold, a wakeful Holy One descended from the heavens, crying out loudly, and so he said, cut down the tree and cut off its branches. Shake off its branches and scatter its fruit. The beasts shall wander away from beneath it, and the birds from its branches. But leave its main roots in the ground, and in fetters of iron and copper in the grass of the field. And with the dew of the heavens it shall be drenched, and with the beasts shall be its lot in the grass of the earth. They will change his heart from a man's, and the heart of a beast will be given him, and 7 periods will pass over him. And by the decree of the wakeful ones is the matter, and by the word of the holy ones is the edict, in order that the living should know that the Most High rules over the kingdom of man, and to whom he wishes he gives it, and the lowest of men he sets upon it. This is a dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen, and you, Belteshazzar, tell me its interpretation. Since all the wise men of my kingdom cannot let me know the interpretation, but you can, because the spirit of holy angels is in you. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was bewildered for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king spoke up and said, Belteshazzar, let the dream and its interpretation not alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream be for your enemies and its interpretation for your foes. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, and whose height reached the sky, and whose appearance was seen by the entire earth, and whose branches were beautiful, and whose fruit was plentiful, and on which was sustenance for all, under which dwelt the beasts of the field, and in whose branches dwelt the birds of the heavens. That is you, O king, for you have become great and strong, and your greatness has increased and reached the heavens, and your dominion extends to the end of the earth. And what the king saw, a holy wakeful one descending from heaven, and he said, Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave its main roots in the ground, and chain him with fetters of iron and copper, and the grass of the field, and with the dew of the heavens he shall be drenched, and with the beasts of the field shall be his lot, until 7 periods pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. And it is the decree of the Most High, which befalls my lord the king. And they will banish you from mankind, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they will feed you grass like the cattle, and with the dew of the heavens you shall be drenched, and the 7 periods shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules over the kingdom of men, and to whom he wishes he gives it. And what they said to leave, the main roots of the tree, your kingdom will remain yours, as soon as you know that heaven rules. Indeed, O king, may my counsel please you, and with charity you will remove your sin and your iniquity by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps your tranquility will last. And this befell King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking upon the royal palace of Babylon. The king raised his voice and said, Is this not the great Babylon, which I built for a royal palace with the strength of my power and for the honor of my glory? The word was still in the king's mouth when a voice fell from heaven, which said, To you they said, O King Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom has turned away from you. From man they will banish you, and your dwelling will be with the beasts of the field. Like cattle they will feed your grass. And 7 periods will pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules over the kingdom of men, and to whom he wishes he gives it. At that time the matter was fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was banished from man. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of the heavens, until his hair grew like the feathers of eagles, and his nails like the claws of birds. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my understanding was restored to me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and glorified him who lives to eternity, whose dominion is an eternal dominion, and whose kingdom is with every generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reckoned as nothing. And according to his will, he foes with the host of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth, and no one can stop his hand or say to him, What have you done? At that time my understanding was restored to me, and I returned to the glory of my kingdom, and my splendor was restored to me, and my leaders and my dignitaries were seeking me. And I was established upon my kingship, and excessive greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, whose works are all true, and whose ways are just, and who can humble those who walk with arrogance. Wow.
Cool.
It's funny how he calls Daniel at the start of this thing. He calls him the greatest among necromancers.
No, he called in his everybody first to appease his gods, and then he called in Daniel.
I'm saying that when he called Daniel, when he addressed Daniel, he said that he is head of the necromancers. O Belteshazzar, head of the necromancers. he it's funny that it doesn't say before what he had done to sin. It kind of alludes it because it says that he needs to be good to the poor, but it seems to also be alluded in this phrase because he doesn't seem to distinguish Belteshazzar or Daniel from the necromancers. He sees him as the head of them, but he doesn't see him as different from him in
No,
essence.
he named him after the god because Daniel is personifying his god.
Yeah, but I'm not saying the name. Like it's not because of. But I'm not
No,
in
I
this
know.
point. I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying the title that he gives him, not the name.
No, I know that. I know that, but the thing is that when he says head of necromancers, he actually thinks Daniel is Belteshazzar at one point. And then when it goes back, he's telling, even though Daniel's standing in front of him, but then when it goes back to say, where'd it go? I lost it. Where'd it go? But then back in verse 16, it says, then Daniel, whose name is, he was talking to, he thought he was literally praying to his god Belteshazzar. In 16, when Daniel, whose name was bewildered for a while, then he became Daniel again as a person. He saw Daniel as a person, not as the god that he thought he was.
The name. Let me look this up. The meaning of the name Belteshazzar, because it clearly means something of the god. I'm not sure he actually thinks that that the name Belteshazzar is the name of a god, the
Yeah.
god, but
Yeah,
because Nebuchadnezzar is
it's said in the
of the god Nabu.
but it said in the last last chapter that he named Daniel after this god, and where it says that in all and where God is with and and every time he's mentioned, where'd it go?
Can I try?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm yeah, I gotta shut up. I'm
No.
less
It's like
because I had a different thought going and than what he was doing.
The names of the god seems to be Bel.
correct. Bell. That's correct.
Belshazzar would be a compound name. The name of the god itself would be Bel. The same way that Nebuchadnezzar, it means, "O God Nabu, preserve my firstborn son." Like the Jewish names, like Daniel means God is my judge, so
Right.
forth. They also had names that meant that had the name of their god in it, but it wasn't the name of the god itself. You know, like Daniel isn't a name of God. It just means God. My God is my the judge is my God. El is my judge.
Right.
So
No, I got
so
that. I got that. But
uh,
when he's talking, you see like everything. If they were speaking of Daniel and his God, the letters would have been capitalized, but they're not. That's where I got that.
well, sorry.
But anyway, go ahead, Ross.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, just briefly. Because Daniel had already proven himself by interpreting dreams and he'd seen his associates come out of the fire, Nebuchadnezzar looked at Daniel and said, my God is Bel, and I really still hold to this position that Bel is the most powerful of all gods. So I'm going to name Daniel Belteshazzar in honor of my God, because Daniel is a representation, a physical, living representation of Bel, my God, the greatest. Do you see the thought pattern here?
Yes.
Nebuchadnezzar.
The name Belteshazzar means Bel protects my life.
Yes.
Protects his life. Bel protect his life.
Right.
It's like a blessing.
Yes.
Like you're naming him Bel protect his life.
Right. And his can be open to his the person who has the name, or his um, if you're saying or projecting on Daniel that he is Bel, then you're saying to Bel, protect his life. Well, his can mean whomever Bel chooses to protect. You see what I'm saying? In a
And
sense,
one question. Sorry, go on.
in a sense, he's saying he's not really praying to Daniel per se, although he could look at it and say, Daniel represents my God.
He would be the Jesus for him.
There you go. Yes, perfect way to put it.
Or a prophet.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
One question I have is who is Nebuchadnezzar talking to at this point? Because until at last Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, like the name of my God, entered before me, in whom is the Spirit. Who is he talking to? He let me see. He is talking about the necromancer, the astrologers, entered, and I related my dream to them. Who is he talking to when he says these things?
That audience, his necromancers and so forth. He's telling everybody the dream that
Ah.
there was this tree, it covered the whole world and the birds and everything. And then until at last when Daniel came in. Okay,
I think sorry, go on.
Is that how it reads?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think I understand now what
Yeah.
he meant by this. I might be wrong, but
Well, he's still not acknowledging Hashem. He is acknowledging his gods first because that's how he's trained to think.
yeah, it's like he is trying to put his honor in this as well, because if he's talking to these people like you're saying, that means that he is saying, look, all of you guys, this person, he is he is the great necromancer, and he has the name of my God in him. He is Belteshazzar.
Yeah.
So it's like, look, he is the guy who is interpreting this for my God. You get it?
Yeah, he can't let go of his
Idols.
pantheism. Yeah, it's his idol.
So is that what he's saying? He's trying to make a prestige thing, saying, look, until at last Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, like the name of my God, entered before me, in whom is the spirit of holy angels, and I told him the dream. Like, no one was able to do this except Daniel, who has the name of my God in him. So he's like a prophet of my God, and he found a way to resolve this. Thus,
Exactly.
my God is the best God.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Nebuchadnezzar is still honoring his God, not Daniel's God.
Right.
And he's projecting. He's like, oh, Daniel's God must be my God.
Yes. So like when he renamed Belteshazzar, it's not Daniel. It's like if Jesus were to walk in the room, hey, that's Jesus. But it's in reality is Daniel, but he sees him as that, and so he's instructing him in that way. And then,
exactly.
Okay, so that's clear, right? We got clarity on it, right? I mean, when he started going into this, I saw two things happen. One of them was, again, like the story of Joseph or the interpretation of the dreams. And the other one I saw was like Adam Codman.
You might want to explain that a little more.
When he was talking about the tree that could stand above and everybody saw it from all the earth. How big was Adam?
Could see from one end to the other.
The other. Okay, exactly. So those were the two references that I was thinking of.
Good one. Good analogy. Good tie.
So that's what I saw. So okay, I'm done. Go ahead.
But Nebuchadnezzar saw the tree as himself, and the whole world knows who I am, boy. I am it. I'm providing for the whole world, birds and people and so forth. But Daniel points out the fact that he wasn't giving charity.
Ooh, good one. And then at the end, he finally realizes that Daniel was right. Oh, I get it now.
I get it again for the moment.
Yeah, we've only showed you 3 times. How many more you need? Oh, if we finally turned you into like a cattle and an animal, and you finally get it.
Actually, I think one of the Midrashim teaches that he turned into an eagle and he
Right.
grew claws and feathers and so forth. And interestingly enough, they made that same comparison to Saddam Hussein when they found him after he'd crawled off in that little spider hole and he
Awesome.
came out. His
I
hair
didn't
was
get,
long.
yeah, I didn't get that, but very good.
Yeah, he thought of himself as the next Nebuchadnezzar. He was actually rebuilding ancient Babylon with some of the original material,
Wow.
and he would
God
uh,
forbid.
he would reproduce missing pieces if necessary. But when they finally caught up with him, his hair was extremely long, his nails had grown, he'd been hiding out in similar situations.
Wow. Didn't even think about that. Thank you for bringing that for today's listeners.
That's perfect. That's beautiful.
Yes.
And it's said 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. He says it. I think he says it 3 times that uh, until you know that the Most High rules over the kingdom of man, and to whom He wishes He gives it. I think he says that 3 times, one after the other, in different
Yeah,
situations.
it's like
Verity.
probably going to have to hit you over the head 3 times before you get this, dude.
It also alludes very well to how God tends to act, because at least I heard that from the rabbis, that God doesn't punish in one go. He doesn't simply out of the blue punish you. Usually he gives you warnings and he does it incrementally. So it seems God gave Nebuchadnezzar three warnings before he was completely disgraced.
But he's not done yet.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. But oh yeah, and the 7 years thing, 7 seasons, 7 times, 7 whatever. What's that?
10 periods.
But again, that ties into the Sabbath, the Shemitah, the returning him back to his place, which is how things are supposed to be in the land of Israel. At the end of 7 years, all debts are forgiven.
Ooh, nice.
There's a lot of just hints, clues, and different things all hidden throughout here. Analogies, there you go.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more to it than what we're expressing here, but just on the surface, you see how rich this is.
Yes.
Incredibly so.
Never saw it quite like this.
Sincerely, I never saw anything like Judaism in my life, and it goes to every aspect of it. You see it in this book, you see it in everything else. Like, no matter what I ever see in Judaism, it never really is just what you're seeing, you know?
Oh yeah.
there's always this profoundness to it. Everything has meaning and deep meaning to it. In fact, it's overwhelming. Like I feel like I will always know nothing. You know when you feel like you will never have even the slightest grasp of what you're seeing.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Well, again, too, there is a way of thinking that says that Daniel, not necessarily a real person, he is a caricature that was established to tell a story. And this particular story, some will say, was written by sages to reveal and conceal certain aspects of Hashem, which is another thing that you see all throughout Torah, from the story of Joseph, revealing dreams, concealing meanings,
Yep.
Esther, Mordecai, the whole revealing and concealing is just a constant thread everywhere.
And it's also part of human psychology if you stop thinking about it. Because one thing that it seems clear from what God does with the Bible, and it's something that I noticed while I was trying to teach English. Even if it seems strange, it is. When I teach English to my students, I do not teach grammar. I never teach grammar. I give them a book, a story, and I tell them to read it. If they don't understand something, I talk to them about it. And we talk to them about it. Oh, why is the phrase done this way? And then I talk to them, and we use it as an opportunity to talk about the language. You know?
Right.
And I started to notice the Jews do that too. Because God could simply just give you rules. Like there's 613 commandments. God could just list them. Why did he tell this whole story? He didn't have to. And then I saw it like this works better. I never saw a student learning English just by reading grammar rules. Never. But my students learn English very fast. Why? Because they're seeing it inside a context that is meaningful. They're seeing it inside a story. We humans are storytellers over everything else. We exist to tell stories and listen to stories. So it is incredible how the Bible is so, it's mind blowing. It understands basic human nature in a way that no other book does in every single facet of it. And even in this one, God wouldn't just simply give you rules, He would tell you a story and have wise people around to explain the story to you explain the rules to you inside the story.
Now, back up what you just said and compare what Nebuchadnezzar was doing with Daniel and the rest, teaching them to read, to write, to eat, to drink the way they do. He was having them first-hand experience. They weren't just being told a story, they were living the experience. Just like your students.
Definitely. It is the most effective way to do it. If you want to change someone's mind, if you want to ingrain something inside them, they have to live through it. Uh, and God understands this so well. When Moses asked God, "What should I say your name is?" God answers, uh, "I will be who I will be." And he would take them from Egypt and so forth. He relates himself to him not through anything, not through a name, not through a person, a view of individual, but the idea that he is going to make them go through an action. I will be what I will be for you, and I will be with you. I will be how I will be with you. I'm not sure if I'm saying the translation correct. Rabbi, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we get you.
But the idea that God preferred to identify himself with an action, with an experience, with meaning. When he says that he is the God of Israel, he doesn't say you should follow me because I can destroy you with the glance of the eye. He doesn't say you should follow me because I am the king of the universe, I am the creator, I made everything. He says you should follow me because I took you away from the bonds of slavery from the land of Egypt. He relates the reason for you following him to an action, to a story, to an experience. And that is a very powerful thing. And humans knew about that from the beginning of time. And Nebuchadnezzar knew that as well. So he tried to make experience tie these people to his belief, to his worldview.
So what
Right.
you're saying, God's name is not a noun, it's a verb.
No, not in that sense. No,
Yes,
I'm not
yes,
saying
yes,
the
yes,
God
yes,
name is
yes.
any.
A verb, it shows action. Action is deeds. You learn by experience. That's why you perform his commandments. Learning by doing, deeds. Israel is a verb, not a noun. Think about it.
To struggle with God.
Yep.
Or Israel, straight to God.
And see, that's what makes Hebrew even better because the Torah scrolls were written without vowels. So those words, you can have a whole bunch of meanings in one word and still be right.
Yeah, and when you look at every other religion, you don't really need a continual line of sages for them. If every Christian died and you took the canons of the church, like the Catholics, so you took the canons of the church, you saw the descriptions of how to do these things, and you did it, and you saw how they interpreted the Bible inside their comments and so forth, you could pretty much revive Christianity. But Judaism is not done that way. Like when you look, how do you study the Talmud? You study the Talmud by having a wiser person mediate the discussion between two younger people. Like you and someone with the same knowledge of you of the Talmud, which would be little if you're starting, would discuss it, and somebody would mediate. It is a discussion. It is a conversation. It is a fluid action. And everything you do, when God says, God actually says in certain instances, you have to tell your children this, explain this to your children. When this happens, the holidays, the different actions, in part to transmit knowledge. Like, why are we
Oral Torah.
eating this? Yeah, exactly. Or why are we eating this bread in Pesach? Because of this, and this. Yeah, if you didn't eat the bread, there would be no reason for anyone to ask. These things create scenarios where a child can ask, "Why are we doing this?" It connects the action to the reality. It connects the truth to action.
Well, one of the things that I always like to try to focus on is this. He spoke to Moses at Sinai, and after Sinai, and he said, when you were on the mountain, you didn't see any shape or any form. You heard only the voice, my voice, right?
Correct.
What is the top thing that you hear recited consistently. Shema Israel. Hear, O Israel. Hear, listen. And again, I don't know how familiar you are with some of the prophecies about Messiah, but one of them is that the question is, where is Messiah? The response is at the gates of Rome, binding and rebinding the wounds. When will he come? And the response again is, today, if you will hear his voice. You're not necessarily looking for Messiah. You're listening for him. The Kol HaTorah speaks about the footsteps of the Messiah. Footsteps are what you hear when someone is approaching. Listen. When I think it was Rebecca was getting ready to send Jacob away to go find his wife, she pulled him in front of her and said, listen in my voice, listen to my words. Hear what I'm telling you. Listen. Over and over and over, you keep getting the message. Listen, listen, listen. Hear, hear, hear. What are you listening for? Truth.
Understanding.
Understanding. When you go before a court, they don't judge you by the sight. They want to hear your story, your testimony.
And it isn't read.
Right.
That's an interesting thing too, because some could say it's not read because the Bible wasn't written, but the Bible was written from the start. Moshe was the one who wrote the Torah, so why not read? Why listen? It has the same thing. It's beautiful when you stop to think about it. I'm here getting my mind blown. I should have said read, like read my instructions, see what I said. But no, he said listen. What? Because you can't connect to something you read. You can't connect with something that you're not experiencing. To listen, you have to have another person present. You don't listen to nothing. You have to have a connection to something to listen outside of your head. You listen to footsteps. You listen to the wind. You listen to a sound. It's something that is outside of you, and it's something that is connecting to you.
Or is affecting you in some way.
Exactly. It's like it's the whole choose life and not death. Wow, it's just thinking about it, it's beautiful. Like it's uh, a complete refusal, a complete casting away of nihilism.
Gav, are you ready to talk? Or are you still babysitting there?
No, I finally just got done babysitting now that they're all.
I'm sorry, that was a bad choice of words.
No. It's that. No,
And then Jeff says everything you guys said is wrong.
no. For the one son finally gets put down, the other son gets up. Put that son down. The daughter gets up. Put the daughter down. The wife gets up and tries to do chores, and I'm like, "No, you're sick. Go lie down."
Just like my wife.
Managing everyone in my household.
God bless you, Gav.
Give them all a dose of Benadryl.
Drug them. Drug them.
I have a syringe and I have Thorazine. Don't make me.
All right, there you go. So, shall we move along to chapter 5 then?
Sure.
Yeah.
Have nothing to say, Gov?
No, not at the moment. I was slightly distracted there for a bit.
Okay.
Let's see, 5. Yeah, I'm there. I can take it. James, are you back? Oh, poor boy. Okay. I'll take 5 and I'll read from mine, if you will.
Okay.
Let's see. Belshazzar the king, descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. Is that where we're at, correct?
Yes.
All right. The descendant of Nebuchadnezzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and he drank his wine in the presence of the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he was tasting the wine, commanded that the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, out of the sacred area of the holy place and the Holy of Holies, which was in Jerusalem, he brought that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold and the silver vessels which had been taken out of the temple, the house of God, which was in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately and suddenly there appeared the fingers of a man's hand and wrote on the plaster of the wall opposite the candlestick. I have to think that this reference to candlestick is a sideways reference to the menorah. I have to think that.
Correct.
So exposed, especially to the light, in the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the color and the drunken, hilarious brightness of the king's face was changed, and his terrifying thoughts troubled and alarmed him. The joints and muscles of his hips and back gave way, and his knees smote together. This guy's scared.
Yeah. Just a bit.
I don't think he was that drunk. Still sober enough to be scared.
There you go.
The king cried aloud, mightily, to bring the enchanters or soothsayers, the Chaldeans, diviners, and the astrologers. The king said to the wise men of Babylon, whoever will read this writing and show me the interpretation of it will be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold put about his neck and be the third ruler in the kingdom. And all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation of it. Then King Belshazzar was greatly perplexed and alarmed, and the color faded from his face, and his lords were puzzled and astounded. Everybody can see it, but nobody can figure it out. Now the queen mother, overhearing the exciting words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. Queen mother said, O king, live forever. Do not be alarmed at your thoughts, or let your cheerful expression and the color of your face be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, Light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, I say, your father, appointed him master of the magicians, enchanters, soothsayers, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, clarify riddles, and solve knotty problems were found in this same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Judah? I have heard that that the spirit of the holy God, or gods, is in you, and that light and understanding and superior wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me, that they might read this writing and make known to me the interpretation of it. But they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard of you, that you can make the interpretation and solve knotty problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple, and have a chain of gold put around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. However, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom, and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would set up, and whom he would he put down. Whom he would put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind and spirit were hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among men, and his heart and mind was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heavens, until he learned and knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints and sets over it whomever he will. I think Daniel just kind of this was the equivalent of smack over the head with an iron skillet.
Pretty much.
You better.
We've been through this.
You know what your dad went through. You're about to get yours.
Come on, mate.
You're about to get yours, buddy. And you, his son, old Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart and mind, though you knew all of this. You knew it, and you were defiant. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought before you. And you, your lords, and your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. The God in whose hand your breath is, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored and glorified, but you have dishonored and disgraced. Then was the part of the hand from the presence of the Most High God, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Numbered, numbered, weighed, divisions. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingship and brought them to an end. Tekel, you are weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Peres, your kingdom and your kingship are divided and given to the Medes and Persians. This was foretold in Isaiah chapter 21, verse 2, 5, and 9. Then Belshazzar commanded, and Daniel was clothed with purple and a chain of gold put around his neck, and a proclamation was made concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. During that night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede took the kingdom. He was about 62 years.
I didn't hear the last part.
He was about 62 years old.
Okay.
I found it a
Wow.
little strange. It's mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, but when it comes to the translation, it's mene, tekel, Peres.
You see, ours has a upharsin again.
Yeah, but Peres is the singular of upharsin.
Okay.
And, okay.
Boy, if that doesn't speak like Ruth and Mordecai, I don't know what was.
You saw that, eh?
Boo, Haman, boo!
I want to tell you something. I saw a midrash the other day that this individual because Esther and Mordecai happened immediately or some short time after this Babylonian. This is where the Medes and Persians actually take over from Babylon. And the story of Esther and Mordecai come into play not too long after this. And there's an individual that Mordecai consults with. If you go and read the story, that individual has a name in the story of Esther. But some say that this was Daniel that Mordecai was speaking with.
Cool.
Now I'll shut up and listen. What do y'all guys got?
I just found it so. It was a burn. You were weighed on the scales and found wanting. That was such a burn. Can you imagine? Imagine the situation. You are a nobody, and you are brought before the king, the guy who rules this entire empire. He could kill you in a heartbeat. He could kill you just by wanting to. And you tell him to his face that he was weighed on the scales and found wanting. Can you imagine that? The courage for that.
It was pretty. You could look at it in one respect and say that Daniel was very bold in saying, you took these things that belong to God from his house, and you're over here worshiping idols with it.
And defiling them.
The God that you are blaspheming or disrespecting controls the very breath that you breathe. Belshazzar could have taken that as a threat.
Yes. In a way, it's interesting that he actually manned up to what he said. He didn't have to. Like, Daniel was risking his neck there entirely. Belshazzar could just say, wrong answer, and just remove his head, like even some Jewish kings did on the later ages.
Yeah.
I didn't like that prophecy. Sorry.
Wrong answer.
Ask, yeah, ask God again. This time with a sword on your neck.
Yeah, no.
No, but did you catch the curious little thing in there? The king's mother.
Now, see, it just lists it queen here. But yeah, I know which translation you're talking about, and they do use the mother.
Right. Well, she calls him, or speaking to him, he says, "Your father." And then Daniel even says, "Your father." So it's pretty clear here that this is the king's son. He said, "Look, you know what your
Mhm.
dad went through. You lived it, bud. You were right there when all this went down. And now you're going to turn around and think you're some kind of hot,
Yeah,
hot."
because it's the
And
latest rage.
you can tell that it's his son also because of his name, Belshazzar.
Yeah.
He is literally named after the god Bel.
Yes.
So it shows how the king was actually very much fond of this god. He named Daniel after him. He named his son after him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But you notice the queen, however you wish to refer to her, might have just one time mentioned Belteshazzar once, but then she continued to refer to him as Daniel.
Yep.
Did you catch that?
Yes, I did.
Yes, true. She just said Belteshazzar once, like to identify him, but continued to call him Daniel.
Why do you suppose? Think it out. Why would she do that?
Because Dad's no longer in charge, and that's his name.
It it could be something like Belteshazzar was a name that Nebuchadnezzar gave him to say that he should stop being a Jew and be one of his servants. He is now under the tutelage of Bel, and he now represents him in his court. So he tried to erase Daniel's original identity and put up the identity of Belteshazzar. And it's interesting to see that if the queen is calling him Daniel, it could be in a subtle way that she is recognizing the God of Israel, that she saw what her husband passed through.
Ha ha ha
She saw. It's
ha.
actually interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that she is the queen mother because of that. If she was only his wife, it would be strange. But being his mother, it makes sense. Like I saw the miracles that God did. I saw your father go up and then go down. I saw your father fall, and I saw everything that the true God did. So I am not going to call him Belteshazzar, that is a name created out of iniquity, out of evil. I'm going to call him Daniel because I learned from my husband's mistake and recognized the true God of Israel.
Now there is one thing that the king did do to his credit. What did he do? He said something and he did something. What did he do? And it's to his credit.
He said that he promised that if whoever resolved this problem, he would give him all the purple represents rulership, of course. It's actually a very expensive tincture that were used by emperors since a long time past. So he was basically saying, "I am going to make you a king over a part of my kingdom. You're going to be like the second in command to me and rule
Okay,
1/3 of
okay.
my
So
kingdom."
so what do you call that? When he made that statement, what would you call that?
He turned over a third
Uh,
of his kingdom.
Let's just make it simple. He made a vow. He fulfilled
yeah.
that vow. He fulfilled that vow. The words that come out of your mouth, you shall perform. That was to his credit. But he was still found lacking.
In a way, it's possible to say what God did to be generous to Belshazzar when you look at how other people suffered in other situations. Because he was lacking, he wasn't enough, he did bad things as well. He was a very ardent idolater, from what he said. But
Yes, he
we
was.
saw Nebuchadnezzar live among beasts. We saw Nebuchadnezzar suffer horrors in life. We saw other kings be blinded and have their arms amputated. We saw a lot of people suffer very horrible things when God saw that they were lacking. But Belshazzar had a quick death, so it could have actually been a way of God saying, okay, you did something good. You're still not good enough, but I'm going to make your end less
How about
horrible than.
how about he didn't learn from his father's mistakes? He did worship the gods of gold, silver, iron, bronze, wood, and he was full of ego. My kingdom, my servants, my concubines.
Yes, he needed to go. He was not up for it. He was weighed and he was found wanting.
He didn't learn from his father's error.
Yep. And when I look at Rashi's comment, I'm looking at it here. It says that, let me see the part. Rashi's, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Rosalie left. Hopefully
Okay.
she'll be back.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna say that. And has about the 26th verse, and has brought it to an end. That this interpretation of the matter, many God has counted your kingdom and has brought it to an end. Rashi says he calculated the end of the allotted time for the kingdom of your father and his seed, and found that it has already been completed. And I found it interesting that he said of your father and his seed, in the sense that of his dynasty,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
It kind of drives home the idea that a dynasty can only last as far as the children learn from the mistakes of the elders. If you cannot learn from the mistakes of those that came before you, you are destined to fall.
Right. Exactly right.
Okay.
Welcome back, Rosalie.
I got raptured.
Where did you hear what I said?
No, I
You
tried to.
fell.
I thought you got raptured, and then it was me. So I got out.
It happened.
Yeah, I know. So but that's okay.
I said that in Rashi's comment in the Chabad website, right? It says that on 26, on verse 26, God has counted your kingdom and has brought it to an end. Rashi comments, and has brought him to an end. He calculated the end of the allotted time for the kingdom of your father and his seed, and found it has already been completed. And it's interesting when he says that your father and your seed and his seed, basically your father and his dynasty. So when he says that, it gives me the thought of, you did not learn from the mistakes of your forebears, of your ancestors, of your father. And because of that, your dynasty has come to an end. It seems like I was talking to Ross. It seems a lot like a warning against making the same mistakes of your ancestors. That if you do not learn from the mistakes of your elders, your children will not survive. You will falter.
And that message is repeated all through Don't turn back to what you came out of, what I brought you out of. Don't go back. It's told a lot. Don't look back. When you come out of Egypt, don't look back. But again, too, your time is up. He looked and said, your, this time is over. This event, this time is up. Remember back at chapter 1, at the end of it, Daniel looked and understood about the 70 years of exile from the writings of Jeremiah. Jeremiah knew that there would be an allotted amount of time for this kingdom, for this exile. Daniel came to understand it. And now here we are again. Your time is up.
I have to go for a second. Be right back.
Sure.
I've got a couple thoughts on this chapter too, because I see a few things.
Sure.
I mean, we're talking about God. We're talking about the articles that are allowed in the Holy of Holies. Who's allowed to touch them?
Ooh. I believe there certain objects were allotted to certain individuals. Only the Kohanim could touch certain things. The Levites could touch certain items, and that was dependent upon which tribe of Levi you were from, Merari or whatever. But
well, they were either Levites or Cohens. So,
exactly.
And guess who they weren't?
True.
That's one thing that I thought about when they were going there, and they defiled them just like Aaron's sons put a strange fire and they died. So it makes sense that Belshazzar died that very night. So I kind of made a comparison with them, even though it's two different entire things, but it was kind of the same situation.
Sure.
I saw that. And for today's application, just because I've got it here in front of me, 23, where it says, and you praise the gods of silver, gold, copper, iron, wood, and stone, which I find the order in that really intriguing, because in a way, those are religions as well. And we know wood is Christianity and stone is Islam.
Right.
So I found that interesting too. And who's screwing up a lot? The Pope.
Well, gold, silver, bronze, iron, that was the four different kingdoms too. That
right.
So.
Or the ages.
Ages, kingdoms, whatever, the different representations of that.
Things. It really shows things made of man, right?
Exactly. Well.
Basically, it brings that home entirely. So you're venerating creation instead of the creator.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Because gold, the cups of gold were used in the temple service for a holy purpose. They were perverting it. Okay? The cups of silver were for the temple service. They perverted it. They were worshiping themselves rather than the Creator. That which was holy, they profaned.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead.
It's a danger of venerating creation. like I said, as a former polytheist, I see that very clearly. That when you believe that anything can be a god, you run the danger of believing that humans can be gods. And from that to believe that you are a god is just one step. It creates a rule that is completely egocentric. It creates a rule that is only based on the self and does not have anything outside it. If you venerate stone, why not venerate a man that is better than stone? My polytheistic friends would say, but we don't venerate the stone, we don't venerate the statue. It's what the statue represents. But what does the statue represent? It represents nothing. It represents air. You can believe that it represents a god, but if you believe that anything can be a god, that there are gods in everything, the history itself shows that that goes towards venerating humans. The Roman emperors were seen as gods. The Greek heroes are venerated as gods by the Greeks, the Hellenes.
Oh,
The moment that you believe that creation can be venerated, you try to venerate yourselves. And that is nihilism. That is death.
or if not yourself, if you venerate the other and consider yourself unworthy, then you are the servant of that person.
You become a slave
Yes.
because you cannot be slave of God in the sense that you're not a subservient lesser thing by being a servant, or you can even say slave of God, because God is God, God is perfect. So being his servant is basically being the servant of everything that is good in this world. It's being the servant of the correct path. It's not a demeaning thing. But being the servant of a man is being the servant of passions, of specific wants, of fickleness, of a mortal life. And it is slavery. It is actual slavery. It's what we would understand as slavery. So when you venerate a man, you become his slave.
Egypt.
Exactly. The pharaohs also considered themselves gods. So my friends can say, oh, we are not venerating statues. We are venerating what the statue represents. But you venerate a man afterwards. So how are you not venerating statues? You may say to yourself that you're not. I'm not going to say that to them because that will make them sad or will break their feelings. I don't want to do that. But that is what they're doing. They are venerating a piece of clay.
The second commandment's pretty clear. I mean, it makes it very clear: do not bow down to or serve. And I was raised in a Christian religion where they we took a knee for a man on a cross thing.
Genuflecting.
Yeah, genuflecting, and so I bring this up to my family. My mom's like, "Well, you don't think that we believe that God lives in there, do you?" I said, "Of course not. You're beyond that." So I bowed to it. Well, we're showing respect, but that guy you're showing respect to, says not to do that sort of thing. Well, we don't believe that God's in there, and it was a circular argument. I really went around with times with him. It makes it really clear: don't bow down to or serve them in any way. But it doesn't matter what you believe if your actions alone, on that basis alone, just those actions separate you from the from the statement, if you will.
Exactly. And the actions lead to the same result. So it doesn't matter. Whatever you believe, it doesn't matter. Oh, I believe that when I'm bowing to this idol, I am bowing to the creator of the universe. Even God says that. Don't bow to a statue made regarding me. So
Or
it doesn't matter who you think it is.
Or in its presence.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter what you believe in that. It will always lead to the same result. If you are venerating something that is physical, you can venerate something else that is physical. And that something else will enslave you.
Are you familiar with the story of Abraham going into Egypt and telling them that Sarah was his sister?
Yes.
Yes.
And the Egyptian ruler called Abraham up and said, "Dude, why are you jerking my chain like that? Why'd you tell me she was your sister?" And his response back was, "Because I perceived that there were no God-fearers here." You remember that response?
Yes.
How is it that Abraham was able to perceive that there were no God-fearers there?
By the idols.
The idols that they were bowing to and praying to. Simple as that.
Exactly.
Okay. James, you
It,
feel
it
like
should.
go. I was gonna
Oh,
say,
sorry.
James, do you feel like you can do chapter 6 if you're still around? If not, I'll do it.
I'm here. I think the girls are down now. Then the wife called. I had to get up and go talk to my wife on the phone. Yeah, chapter 6. I'm going to be reading out of the JPS. It was the language is easier for me to read sometimes, and it was open. So here we go. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. It pleased Darius to appoint over the kingdom 120 satraps,
Yeah.
Satraps.
satraps to be in charge of the whole kingdom. Over them were 3 ministers, one of them Daniel, to whom these satraps reported, in order that the king not be troubled. This man Daniel surpassed the other ministers and satraps by virtue of his extraordinary spirit, and the king considered setting him over the whole kingdom. The ministers and satraps looked for some fault in Daniel's conduct and manner of state, but they could not find neither fault nor corruption, inasmuch as he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. Those men then said, "We are not going to find any fault with this Daniel, unless we find something against him in connection with the laws of his God." Then these ministers and satraps came thronging into the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." All the ministers of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, companions, and governors are in agreement that a royal ban should be issued under sanction of an oath, that whoever shall address a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into the lion's den. So issue the ban, O king, and put it in writing so that it be unalterable as the law of the Medes and Persians, it may not be abrogated. Thereupon King Darius put the ban into writing. When Daniel learned that it had been put into writing, he went to his house, in whose upper chamber he had windows made facing Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he knelt down, prayed, and made confession to his God, as he had always done. Then those men came thronging in and found David petitioning his God in supplication. They then approached the king and reminded him of the royal ban. Did you not put in writing a ban that whoever addresses a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into a lion's den. The king said in reply, the order stands firm as a law of the Medes and Persians that may not be abrogated. Thereupon they said to the king, Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, pays no heed to you, O king, or to the ban that you put in writing 3 times a day. He offers his petitions to his God. Among hearing that, the king was very disturbed, and he set his heart upon saving David, and until the sun set made every effort to rescue him. Then those men came thronging into the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that any ban that the king issues under sanction of oath is unalterable. By the king's order, Daniel was then
Sorry.
It happens.
Okay, I'm muting.
Okay, yeah, I wish I could. By the king's order, Daniel was then brought and thrown into the lion's den. The king spoke to Daniel and said, Your God, whom you serve so regularly, will deliver you. A rock was brought and placed over the mouth of the lion's den. The king sealed it with his signet and with the signet of his nobles, so that nothing might be altered concerning Daniel. The king then went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and his sleep fled from him. Then at the first light of dawn, the king arose and rushed to the lion's den. As he approached the den, he cried to Daniel in a mournful voice. The king said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, was the God whom you served so regularly able to deliver you from the lions? Daniel then talked with the king. O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel who shut the mouths of the lions so that they did not injure me, inasmuch as I was found innocent by him, nor have I, O king, done you any injury. The king was very glad and ordered Daniel to be brought up out of the den. Daniel was brought up out of the den, and no injury was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Then by order of the king, those men who had slandered Daniel were brought, and together with their children and wives were thrown into the lion's den. They had hardly reached the bottom of the den when the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius rose to all peoples and nations of every language that inhabited the earth. May your well-being abound. I have hereby given an order that throughout my royal domain men must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God who endures forever. His kingdom is indestructible, and his dominion is to the end of time. He delivers and saves. He performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, for he delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Thus Daniel prospered during the reign of King Darius and during the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
And what do we learn from this lesson? Lions don't eat kosher.
Awesome.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I just had to share that.
That was awesome.
That was marvelous. That was perfect.
No, but just the one thing that does stand out here is these men were way more vicious than those lions ever could have been.
Yeah.
Yep.
Their children and their wives were thrown into the den. That surprised me. Surprised me to hear that.
it's consistent with what we hear of how God treated, for example, I forgot his name, Kit, the guy that robbed, that took booty from the encampment of the Israelites, the spoils. He took the spoils and hid them, and in the end, he was killed by God. You remember?
Yeah, but I can't think of his name.
I
Oh
think
no,
you
I'm
think
confusing. I'm confusing. I'm
Oh,
saying the
Jacob?
one that no, I'm confusing. I'm saying the one that tried question Moshe and wanted to be himself the
Oh, Korach.
a
Barack.
yeah. His entire family was killed as well, and all his followers.
True.
kind of.
Yeah, I was going to say some of his sons lived.
Yes.
And some didn't, right? Oh, I didn't know that. So some lived and some didn't, right?
Right.
Okay. So there is a precedent for God punishing people collectively. And in Esther's story with Mordecai, it happens the same thing. The entire family of that guy was killed, of Haman.
Boo.
Boo! I knew somebody was going to. That was perfect.
Yeah, that was my
Uh,
designated line during Purim.
that's perfect. And one interesting thing is that we think is that how much lineage was more important, I think more focused back then than nowadays. Nowadays, people don't really think that they have any responsibility regarding their parents. While in ancient times, it seemed that there was some view of responsibility. Not complete, of course, there are individuals, but there was some form of retribution that went through a generation. Regarding the wives, I understand it actually a lot more than the children because I know a lot of bad people in my life, and even the ones whose spouse seemed to be good, I always wondered if they are with them and they are supporting them, how good can they actually be? In olden days, it's more harder to say that because the marriage was arranged. But it could be understood that these wives were benefiting from from these wicked men and did not oppose of their actions.
Are you talking about in this particular instance, or as a in
This
general as a
this
whole?
this particular instance,
Yeah, yeah.
like it
Now,
could be.
sure. They again, you had the jealousy thing. We got this guy over here who's the head of all of us. He's a Jew. We don't want that man. We're going to take him out one way or another. That's the ego thing again. The prejudice, bias, whatever, however you want to slice it. And then they were a little bit more cunning, a little bit, hey, let's build up the king's ego. Anybody that prays to any other god or doesn't come to the king himself, putting the king on the level of a god for consultation.
Again,
Yes,
Yep,
man.
playing to the man's ego. Sure, yeah,
you
I'll go
see
for
this
that.
recurring theme of divining the king, divinizing the king,
Right, deifying, deifying the man.
deifying. Sorry, English, deifying the king. You
They
know, a phrase that struck me a lot when you were saying this, uh, James, that the viziers and satraps at the beginning say, "O King Darius, may you live forever." And then Daniel, the first thing he said was, "O King, may you live for, may the king live forever." And it's interesting how these two phrases seem juxtaposed in a way.
Well, he didn't have a beef with the king because he knew who turned him in.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying how these two phrases are the part of these phrases that are different that make you think. Why, like the first one, these viziers and the satraps say, "O King Darius, may you live forever. You, King Darius, live forever," equating him to a god. And they say that he will be like, and he as a god, that he should make this rule that people should only pray to him as a god for these 30 days. And he agreed to that, right?
Right?
When Daniel first saw him, he does not say, "King Darius, may you live forever." He say, "May the king live forever."
Oh, you heard the
Because,
difference.
yeah,
You heard the
may the
difference.
king live forever. The difference is that when you say "May the king live forever," have you ever seen the queen? The thing, "The king is dead, long live the king." Have you ever seen that expression? The king is dead, long live the king.
No,
Have you ever
never
seen
seen that expression.
that?
No.
That is an expression of the Portuguese monarchy. The Portuguese monarchy has that expression, and I think the British monarchy has it as well. Uh, it means "the king is dead, long live the king" means the king died, but the institution of kingship remains, and may the new king live long.
Correct.
Okay.
So, can you see the distinction between the satraps and the viziers and Daniel? The satraps and the viziers saying, "You, King Darius, live forever." Daniel said, "May the king live forever."
Yeah, but which king was Daniel referring to?
God. He could be saying
There
God,
you
but he
go.
could not. He can say be saying God. Yes, he could be saying God live forever and like create the situation, but it could also be a double meaning in the sense that he may be saying God, but he also might be saying the his institution, the institution of kingship of Darius, may it last forever, instead of making Darius a man, an ever living thing. He is simply praising, trying to bless the institution itself.
Ah, so from the mouth of one, I heard two. Svay Denham.
Make sense?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I just like
King,
the contrast in that.
sure. The king will hear what he wants to hear. Or Darius, anyway.
True.
Well, Daniel is looking a lot different than it ever did before, doesn't it?
Yep.
This is actually the first time I'm reading Daniel. So,
Ever? First
and
time
it's
ever?
been, yep, and it's been a very good first read.
Wow.
This is my first time since like middle school that I've actually sat here with the text and looked through it. Yeah.
Ross, you are removing my virginity in Daniel.
I know you meant that in a polite way.
Ross has a reputation. You know.
That's right. He's the connected dot guy.
Oh, and since you being the connected dot guy, go back another chapter and look at how the Queen Mother says that phrase. In
So,
verse 10, chapter 10. What does she say?
we haven't been to chapter 10 yet.
No, it's no, verse 10, chapter 5, verse 10, the
Was it
Queen
five?
Mother.
Yeah.
Okay.
She
Look
watched.
at the phrase she uses.
Mine says, now the queen, mother in brackets, overhearing the exciting words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet house. The queen, mother in brackets, said, O king, live forever.
Here it
Yeah.
says actually made the king live forever in mine. It says the same thing
Yeah.
as Daniel said in the other one.
Sure.
She
I don't know if
watched
it's
her.
a,
She watched
But
her son go nuts, and now she doesn't want to lose her grandson.
ah,
Basically,
no,
there's some.
but it could be actually a parallel because
true.
if she's saying the same thing that Daniel said afterwards, they could
Exactly.
be saying the same. You know what I'm saying?
Daniel said to his father, and now she is saying to her son the same words that Daniel said. Do not be alarmed at your thoughts, and or let your cheerful expression or the color of your face be changed.
Uh,
Same
oh,
language
I'm
Daniel
saying
used.
specifically.
No, he was
But I'm saying
comparing the two verses.
specifically the verse of 5:10 with the verse of let me find it again with the verse of the rest is okay made it in the okay with the verse of 6:22, the verse of 5:10 and 6:22, the same phrase.
Hmm. Oh well, okay, that's 21 in mine, but yeah. O king, live forever. Said
It
the
is the exact same phrase.
exactly.
It's mind blowing the subtlety of
Yes.
this.
Things that you just don't normally pick up on. Now you're really catching those little nuances.
Wow, she literally said the same phrase.
Sure.
He's picking up on nuggets, Russ.
There you go. Now you're connecting some dots, baby.
Gav, you got anything?
I'm just listening.
Okay.
I can imagine Gav in the end of this whole thing say, "Okay, now let me say, all you guys, everything you guys said is wrong."
No. I mean, I don't know why I need to. You guys are having your own class, basically. It's kind of cool.
I'll bet.
Are we making sense?
Yes.
I mean, Gav, like, do we make sense?
He's asking the rabbi.
I know.
Yeah. Are we going through the right way, or are we making sense? Or is what we're saying accurate?
Yes.
Okay,
I would like to read chapter 7, if that's okay with y'all.
go for it.
Cool.
Proceed.
Okay. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and the visions of his mind while asleep in his bed. That he wrote Then he wrote the dream and said the beginnings of the matter. Daniel raised his voice and said, I saw in my vision during the night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens were stirring upon the great sea, and four huge beasts were coming up out of the sea, each one different from the other. The first was a lion, and it had wings of an eagle, until its wings were plucked and it was taken from the earth, and it stood on feet like a man, and the heart of a mortal was given it. And behold, another second beast, resembling a bear, and it stood to one side, and there were three ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And so did they say to it, Get up and eat much meat. After this I saw, and behold, another one, like a leopard, and it had four wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had four heads, and dominion was given it. After this I saw the visions of the night, and behold, the fourth beast, awesome and dreadful and exceedingly strong, and it had huge iron teeth. It ate and crushed and trampled the rest with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before me, and it had 10 horns. I looked at these horns, and behold, another small horn came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were plucked out before it. And behold, eyes like human eyes were on this horn, and a mouth speaking arrogantly. I was looking until the thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days sat. His raiment was as white as snow, and his hair and his head was like clean wool. His throne was sparks of fire, and its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and emerging from before him, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000s rose before him. Justice was established, and the books were open. And I saw from them the sound of the arrogant words that the horn spoke. I looked until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given into the flame of fire. But as for the other beasts, their dominion was removed, and they were given an extension of life until a set time. I saw in the visions of the night, and behold, with the clouds of the heaven, one like a man was coming, and he came upon the Ancient of Days and was brought before him. And he gave him dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all peoples, nations, and tongues shall serve him. His dominion is an eternal dominion which will not be removed, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. My spirit, I, Daniel, became troubled within this sheath, and the visions of my mind terrified me. I drew near to one of those standing there, and I asked him the truth of all of this. And he told me, and he let me know the interpretation of the matters. He said, these huge beasts, which are 4 kingdoms which shall arise from the earth. And the high holy ones will receive the kingdom, and they will inherit the kingdom forever and for all and to all eternity. Then I wished to determine the truth of the 4th beast, which was different from all of them, excessively dreadful. Its teeth were of iron, and its nails of copper. It ate and crushed to powder, and the rest it trampled with its feet. And concerning the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other one that came up, and the 3 that fell before it, and the horn that was like this, and that had eyes and a mouth speaking arrogantly. Its appearance was greater than all of its companions. I looked, and the horn that was like this waged war with the holy ones and overwhelmed them, until the Ancient of Days came and gave revenge to the high holy ones, and the time arrived that the holy ones inherited the kingdom. So he said, the 4th beast represents a 4th kingdom that will be on the earth, which will be different from all the kingdoms, and it will devour the whole land and trample it and crush it. And then 10 horns that sprout from that kingdom represent 10 kings that will rise, and the last one will rise after them, and he will be different from the first, and he will humble 3 kings. And he will speak words against the Most High, and he will oppress the high holy ones, and he will think to change the times and the law, and they will be delivered unto his hand until time, 2 times and a half time. And the judgment shall be established, and they will remove his dominion to be destroyed and annihilated until the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under all the heavens will be given to the people of the high holy ones. Its kingdom is a perpetual kingdom, and all dominions will serve it and obey it. Until here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts terrified me greatly, and my colors changed upon me, and I kept the matter in my heart.
So now Daniel's the one having the fearful dreams.
Yeah.
I can imagine why. That would have scared me a lot as well.
Well, these 4 beasts in Daniel's dream are just like the 4-part statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw. Only Nebuchadnezzar's statue was a statue. These are beasts that he's seeing. living, active. Of course, it represents the four kingdoms: Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, and Rome. Um, Rome,
And after the fourth,
yeah, Rome being the last one, trampled with its feet, destroyed with its nails, tore down the temple, burnt the land on its way out, burnt all the Torah scrolls, killed the people, the priests, the prophets, whatever. Just absolutely burned with fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, this particular kingdom will. But this is what it does say too here. I watched, because of the sound of the great words which the horn was speaking. This entire, that particular section, I should say, to me has always stood for Christianity, and it also pertains to another chapter here in the book of Daniel. But it's interesting here that I kept looking until the thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days, the Eternal Father, took his seat. His garment was like the white of snow. His throne was like a fiery burning flame. That suggests to me, hinting that the kingdom, the rule, the idolatry will continue and up until the time that the Sanhedrin court sits and takes its seat and begins to judge the nations as they should. This little horn that came up after, it is like the Ishmaelite exile, the last exile, the fifth exile, if you will. I'll stop there. That's enough for a moment. Y'all jump in.
Well, as long as nobody brings up a reference to the book of Revelations, I'm all good.
Yeah, that's a big thing over there on the over across the road. This particular chapter's often used. It says beast. They say dragon. That's the word they use, which could mean a lizard. But it just says beast. Is there a particular beast that we're not getting? Or does it matter, really?
Can you rephrase that question, please?
Well, we have a leopard, we have a lion, we have a bear, and it said beast. Our friends across the road, the Messies, they refer to this often as a dragon. And I want to know if there's anything specific, given any clues that might lead us to know what kind of beast we were, since we got specific on the other three. What kind of beast is it?
well, I never saw a dragon with 10 horns.
No, but Japan uses the dragon, so I think China might as well. And if we're looking at that across the road, that could be what it assimilates to.
One thing that's interesting about this is like the Roman Empire fell a long time ago. If you consider the Byzantine Empire the continuation of the Roman Empire, you can say it's been less time, like 400 years ago, at max 400 years ago. So other empires have risen and fallen in this time as well. You can look at the British Empire, the German Empire, the Reich itself,
Russia.
Russia, the Tsars, And then the Soviet Union, you can see that as an empire as well. America, you can see as the current empire. Uh, is there any cyclicalness to this? Like, can we also ascribe these four empires to present day situations until the coming of the Messiah? Because it seems there's a big gap between the fourth and the current year, you know?
No. The fourth one, like I said, extends all the way down to the time of the judgment. It's until the throne or the seats were placed for the judges. Okay? This is the final judgment, the last judgment, the end of days. And there's differing opinions as to when the resurrection will happen, but the resurrection is the final judgment. And each of these empires, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, is a representation of a world power. But what it's trying to point out on the fourth beast, it says that it was terrible, powerful, dreadful, exceedingly strong, iron teeth, different from all the beasts that came before it. The first one was an eagle, which Nebuchadnezzar was transformed into an eagle for 7 years. Then comes the bear. Then comes the leopard. But this one is not really given an animalistic character. It's more, it just right out of the gate says iron teeth, crushed, devoured, 10 horns. But if you go back and compare with Nebuchadnezzar's vision, this last kingdom that he saw was iron, 10 toes, iron and clay. Right?
Right.
Huh.
And Nebuchadnezzar's idol was destroyed by the rock that was cut out from the mountain without hands. This particular fourth beast, and the previous ones as well, it says that will all come to an end. The language is different here, but it's saying that the kingdom of Hashem will be set up, and it'll be a kingdom forever and ever, and be given to the saints of the Most High. The similar wording back when he was talking to Nebuchadnezzar was the rock would be thrown at the feet, and the entire statue from head to toe would be destroyed. So that's saying all of idolatry would be destroyed. The rock that was cut out of the mountain without human hands, obviously that's heavenly hands. And
I heard oh,
go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. The rock that was cut not by human hands. The first tablets.
Or the new temple.
Yeah, I went ooh, and it spit out of my mouth. I didn't have really anything to follow up, but that struck me when you said that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
That's all I got.
But a rock that is cut out of a mountain. Mountains are almost always associated with idolatry. High places. What are you, O mountain? That language is found in, I think, Ezekiel or Isaiah. No, it's Isaiah. Yeah. Anyway, um, that rock that was cut out are the people representing the people that Hashem has called out of idolatry, taken for himself. And that is what is used to destroy this idolatry in all forms of it.
Hooray for the gear.
Hooray for the bear.
But you see the
One
similarity
question.
here. 4 kingdoms, 4 parts to a statue, 4 beasts. They all have a certain amount of time, a lot of time. It'll all come to an end. Hashem is saying, I've got, you know, after y'all are all said and done, I'll set up my
Uh,
king.
uh, the the last one that is supposed to be of iron and clay. You said they would be the Roman Empire that divided in two, right?
I've always felt like, well, no, the legs, east and west, the 10 toes, iron and clay. The, as far as I know, the legs are all iron. Iron and clay, to me, is saying that there's a mixture. Clay is something that you, dirt and water, it's malleable and can be formed and shaped, but so can iron. Iron has to be put through the fire and made molten to take a shape. Clay, on the other hand, is shaped and then put in the fire to harden it so that it maintains that shape.
Unless you're God and you make a person.
Sure.
But
But either way, it's showing that there's similarities. They're part of a whole. And I've always felt like
they don't mix.
they don't mix. Islam and Christianity, they're not gonna mix.
But it's interesting that this can actually go. It, have you noticed that along our history, since the fall of the Roman Empire, duality has tended to manifest itself in some way or another. First, the Western Roman Empire, then and the Eastern Roman Empire. Then you can look at the various different rivalries among nations tended to have a more focused in between two. France and England, Spain and Portugal, France and Germany, the Allied powers, and I don't know how to say the other ones in English. Weish, I forgot. Yeah, basically the German Empire against the Allies, then the Third Reich against the Allies, and then Russia against the U.S., the USSR, right, and the U.S. There's always seems to be since that time, since that break of the Roman Empire, a sense of duality between two sides, and including Christianity and Islam. There's always been some tension between the East and the West. And could that be all of that be translated to this clay and iron? The idea is not just like one thing, but it's all these dualities that are being manifested in history and creating this tension.
Okay, this try to see it from this angle. Militarily, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, each in their own right had a powerful military. They went about conquering and absorbing other cultures. The Roman Empire was the one that morphed. It stopped being soldiers and the Senate and the Caesar and went to a pope. It became a spiritual kingdom rather than a how shall I say, war machine. Okay, they morphed and started conquering spiritually instead of by holding you at gunpoint. Am I making sense?
Yes.
That's why it was different from all the other beasts.
Yes.
It was just more economical. They got smart about it in the end.
Sure. In a sense, they were going back to what Nebuchadnezzar did. Take the smartest, the brightest, the most intelligent, and just teach them a different way.
And put them in a monastery where they can't have children and teach anybody else.
No, that is for them to teach others. It's for
Well, I
if
mean,
you want to control a people, convert their kings.
Follow the
If
leader.
you want to control the people, make the leaders of these people agree with you. And then the leaders will make the people agree with you, if they want to or not.
Sure. Make the leaders bow, and then the locals will bow to their leader.
Exactly.
It's not about the money.
You get bonus points. You get bonus points if you make the leader feel that they're getting a lot more power over it with that.
Exactly. It's not about the money, it's about the power. And what is power? Control.
Definitely.
Anyway,
I could read another chapter if you want. I have to go after that, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead and go or read. Ha. Go ahead, get out. See what I can. No. We're on 8, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had appeared to me earlier. I saw in the vision, at the time I saw it, I was in a fortress of Shushan, in the province of Elam. I saw in the vision that I was beside the Ulai River. I looked and saw a ram standing between me and the river. He had 2 horns. The horns were high, with one higher than the other, and the higher sprouting last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward. No beast could withstand him, and there was no one to deliver from his power. He did as he pleased and grew great. As I looked on, a he-goat came from the west, passing over the entire earth without touching the ground. The goat had a conspicuous horn on his forehead. He came up to the 2-horned animal that had been standing between me and the river and charged at him with furious force. I saw him reach the ram and rage at him. He struck the ram and broke its 2 horns, and the ram was powerless to withstand him. He threw him to the ground and trampled him, and there was none to deliver the ram from his power. Then the he-goat grew great, but at the peak of his power, his big horn was broken. In its place, 4 conspicuous horns sprouted toward the 4 winds of heaven. From one of them emerged a small horn that extended itself greatly toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew as high as the host of heaven, and it hurled some stars of the heavenly host to the ground and trampled them. It vaunted itself against the very chief of the host, and its account the regular offering was suspended, and his holy place was abandoned. An army was arrayed iniquitously. Oh, okay, here we go. Sorry, y'all. An army, this is verse 12a. An army was arrayed iniquitously against the regular offering. It hurled truth to the ground and prospered in what it did. Then I heard a holy being speaking, and another holy being said to whomever it was speaking, how long will what was seen in the vision last? A regular offering be forsaken because of transgression, the sanctuary be surrendered, and the heavenly host be trampled. He answered me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. While I, Daniel, was seeing the vision and trying to understand it, there appeared before me one who looked like a man. I heard a human voice from the middle of Ulai calling out, Gabriel, make that man understand the vision. He came near to where I was standing, and as he came, I was terrified and fell prostrate. He said to me, understand, O man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. When he spoke with me, I was overcome by a deep sleep as I lay prostrate on the ground. Then he touched me and made me stand up and said, I'm going to inform you of what will happen when wrath is at an end, for it refers to a time appointed for the end. The two-horned ram that you saw signifies the kings of Media and Persia. On the back, the he-goat, the king of Greece, and the large horn on his forehead, that is the first king. One was broken and 4 came in its stead. That means 4 kingdoms will arise out of a nation, but without its power. When their kingdoms are at an end, when the measure of transgression has been filled, then a king will arise, impudent and versed in intrigue. He will have great strength, but not triumph his own strength. He will have great strength, but not through his own strength. He will be extraordinarily destructive. He will prosper in what he does and destroy the mighty and the people of holy ones. By his cunning, he will use deceit successfully. He will make great plans, will destroy many, taking them unawares, and will rise up against the chief of chiefs, but will be broken, not by human hands. What was said in the vision about evenings and mornings is true. Now you keep the vision a secret, for it pertains to far-off days. So I, Daniel, was stricken and languished many days. Then I arose and attended to the king's business, but I was dismayed by the vision that no one could explain it.
Well, some of this is explained inside the text itself.
Can you repeat that, Ross? It was explaining.
Victor, can you mute, please?
It's mine? Okay.
Obviously, some of it's explained inside the text. Media Persia, the two-horned ram, shaggy he-goat, Greece, the 4 horns, the 4 kingdoms, the 4 generals that took different sections of the Grecian Empire after Alexander the Great died. But the uh, transgressors here would have been the apostate Jews, the ones who fell into Hellenistic ways. And there was also a situation where I'm not sure the Grecian king's name, but I believe it was him that brought in a pig and sacrificed it on the altar. Gav, can you help me out with that one? He polluted.
The Hanukkah story.
Right.
Yes. So Antiochus Epiphanes instituted a practice that Jews were to be made to sacrifice a pig on the altars. And Judah Maccabee, or Judah the Hammer, refused, and a Hellenized Jew walked forward to do it, to sacrifice a pig, and Judah Maccabee killed him.
Hopefully he can come back.
James felt.
James said he had to leave.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I also have to leave, but because I have to teach English in 8 hours, but I think I can teach with a bit of my mind not working, so I'll stay a bit longer.
No, I need to call it here pretty quick myself. I mean,
Okay.
I think we've really just blown Daniel out of the water. There's a lot more to it. It goes way deeper than this. But for your first time through, I think your mind has enough to handle.
It was glorious. It was beautiful. It's interesting how it carries so much meaning in such such small space. You start reading it, you think you're just reading a story, but it has things below it. The entire Tanakh can be seen with that. I noticed everything you think you're reading just a little story, but if you look at it deeply, everything is imbued with a lot of meaning.
Yep.
It's just the same story over and over, just different characters.
That's right.
The only thing I find interesting in this particular chapter, I feel that there's something different about it because Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar what will happen. He tells the story to him. He also tells later on, this is after this situation, right? Because this is the fourth year of Belshazzar, so a different time. Uh, he also will, in the end, tell Belshazzar the same story. Yet, in this dream in particular, he is instructed to keep silence because this is something that will happen in the future. Why did he have to keep silence about this dream, about this story, and not keep silence about the other stories that he actually told Nabucodonosor and his son?
Okay, if you pay attention to the timestamp, it says third year of Belteshazzar. This is
Mm-hmm.
Nebuchadnezzar's son. This is
Yes.
before his son died. This is before his son
Yes.
took the cups. He knows that the Medo Persian Empire is going to come and destroy this is Babylonian. He knows that the Medo-Persian Empire is going to fall to Greece, but knowing that Greece or Medo-Persia is about to come into power, it wouldn't be wise to run right straight up and tell Darius that his kingdom's going to fall. He told Nebuchadnezzar, but Daniel is starting to see that, wow, God's got a plan, and this is going to go on and on. And the other fascinating thing is Daniel looked forward and saw that this is for the far distant future. Well, we must be in the far, far distant future because we're looking back, and that's pretty much ancient history to us.
Another thing too is Daniel was translating dreams that the kings had. The last two chapters were dreams that Daniel had.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, he is clearly not biased against the kings because he is actually mortified by this dream. Like, he continued doing the king's work, and I was terrified about the vision, but no one realized it. So, it's not like, when you look at Jeremiah really is like, this is going to happen, this is how things are, and let it happen. He might feel bad about it happening to the Jews and so forth, but he's very much like, oh, this is God's will, boom, happens. Daniel is actually like, oh my God, this is going to happen. Oh God, this is going to happen. You see, he's worried about it. He's sweating cold. He gets ill because of this prospect. So he really didn't want this to be the case. And this happened in the third year of Belshazzar's reign, Belshazzar's kingdom. So the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had was already said, and he already explained it. But he didn't say exactly what the other kingdoms were, right? He never said it exactly.
Didn't call him by name.
So that would be the secret. What these other the parts that were not the head, that was the only thing that Nebuchadnezzar was interested in. Those other parts, what they were. That was the secret.
The other difference here is this. At the beginning of all this, Daniel understood that there was a 70-year exile that was going to take place. He learned that by reading Jeremiah. Now that he's in the middle of this and these dreams keep coming, he sees that it's not just Babylon, it's Medo-Persia, and then it's Greece, and then it's Rome. And Daniel's seeing how, way down the timeline. And what's terrifying for him, and the most frightening of all, is for his people. Will they survive all this? Look at all of these successive kingdoms and oppressions and suppressions and repressions and defilements. Will the people survive? Will God's people survive it all? That's what's the most terrible.
And even if they do survive, will they be who they are today? Like, even if they live, will their spirit actually live through it?
Sure. He sees the
because you can survive and not live.
Say again?
Because you can survive and not live.
Correct.
The Holocaust taught you that.
It's just, one successive destruction right after another, one succession of overpowering and repression. Like I said, it's just, and Daniel's looking way down the road. When will it end? And like he's already seen in one vision, this continues until the seats replace, the Sanhedrin sets up, and justice returns. Torah justice, Torah law, until that returns. This continues. But that is what actually puts an end to it all, is when Torah justice returns. For all mankind.
I keep I keep imagining what will bring this. I know it's foolish to do so. I remember Rosalie writing that poetic that poetic proverb.
Oh.
Men make plans and God laughs.
Yeah.
Uh, Pretty much that. Like I keep trying to think what will happen. I'm a bachelor in international relations and international politics, and I keep thinking like, what the hell is gonna happen for Israel to become the greatest superpower in the world, become a theocratic monarchy, and still dominate everything else? It's wild. It's like, what causes that? You know?
We shall see.
Are you saying Israel becoming an economic world superpower? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because
No,
its dominion
no.
will be over all else.
Dominion. Okay. That is the Torah dominion. If you read the prophets the way I do, it says that the nations will continue. The nations will still be there. The idolatry leaves, but what happens is the wealth of the nations flow to Jerusalem, meaning that the nations will continue to be there, thrive, and produce, but all of its efforts now go towards Israel, the temple, and Torah.
Correct.
No more
Definitely.
idolatry.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, for that if that happens, Israel would be, by consequence, the superpower. And I'm not saying like the other nations wouldn't have power, wouldn't have money, but like America is the current hegemon, and other nations do have power, do have money, do have riches, and so forth. I'm saying like Israel would become the next America, and that's baffling to imagine. You know, I can see it happening, but it's like, wow. I'm curious as to what would cause that.
When you think of the wealth of the nations, don't think gold, silver, and that such. Think of the Torah scholars flowing to Jerusalem. They go in, they're encouraged, taught, elevated, however you want, and then they go back out and maintain in their own realm. The nations never cease.
Hmm.
It's just the ebb and flow, the running to and fro, going in for Torah and coming back. Because at that point, idolatry's gone, all the false teachings are gone. The world shall be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. And the wealth of the nations, the representatives, the administrators, the ambassadors, the presidents, whatever, the leaders of the nation go, the spiritual leaders, to learn and then
Uh,
return.
I understand the part of I already understood the part of the nations not ceasing to exist, of course. But so you're also saying that the idea would not be that Israel would become a superpower. It wouldn't be like a military, economic, and
No.
political superpower. It would be, we would have the same world we have today regarding maybe America having the greatest economy, and China having greatest economy, some other nations having the best military, but Israel would be the spiritual focus of the world.
Think about the first temple and the power God had and the earth and everybody had with God actually being in the first temple. That's basically what's going to be restored because our thinking is so far away and we are so far removed from God. I mean, you got to remember when God spoke to the congregation on Sinai, all he did was say words and the whole congregation died and he had to resurrect them. That kind of
That
flow.
happened?
Yeah. And that kind of power is coming back.
Solomon had copper mines. And a lot of people would say that it's this island north of Michigan, right?
Ooh,
Rosalie?
the UP, yeah.
Yeah.
Iron Mountain.
Right. And he brought in Hiram from Lebanon because he worked in copper. Hiram was very instrumental in the construction of the temple. The Queen of Sheba
From the
came
city of
to
Tyrus,
visit.
right?
Right. The Queen of Sheba came to visit, and she brought lots of gold and some other presents. The nations were still there, and they brought and contributed in whatever fashion they were capable of doing or were instrumental to be doing. Solomon had
Yeah, but
ships.
in that time, Israel was also a regional power as well. So they had a lot of vassal
Yeah.
states and so forth. They weren't the world power, of course. There was no such thing in that time period, truly. But you would see in that then a increase in Israel's preeminence, at least in the Middle East, right?
Think of it this way. Israel doesn't have any oil in the ground like the Arab states do. There's no diamonds just laying all over the field. They don't export gold by the tons. What natural resource is there that the entire world would want?
God.
God. And that's their purpose for being there, to preserve and teach Torah. That makes it the center of the world.
That's why God chose that land to give them.
Yeah, that's fair. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine. That friend of mine that I told you that's a polytheist. Uh, he respects the Jews a lot, actually, which is funny enough. But one thing that he told me that I found funny was like, yeah, Israel's a nice country. Well, like, Mark Twain was there, and when he went there, he said it was a wasteland. And now it's irrigated. The desert is getting smaller because of the irrigation. Everything is getting beautiful because of how the Israeli take care of the land. And like the land isn't beautiful by itself. People need to go there to make it beautiful, and it has no national resources. And I was like, that's actually kind of poetic, don't you think? The idea that although Israel does have natural beauty, when I looked at photos, I saw very breathtaking, beautiful places. But the idea that Israel is actually pretty much empty in instance of national or natural wealth, natural resources, and even in beauty, it doesn't compare like with the Czech Republic or with Slovenia, those countries that have those Switzerland, those kind of countries. It's like it is not the abundance of glorious natural beauty that we see in some other places, but that is not its focus. When I start thinking about like what makes Israel beautiful, what makes Israel great is God. It's as if
Yes.
God chose a place that is to basically say nothing here is actually better than anywhere else naturally. It's not a place that incentivizes you to do cult to nature. It's not a place that incentivizes you to say, "Wow, this mountain must be a god." It's a place where you can actually see the God, to study God, and it is what makes this place holy. It's what you put in it. It's not actually the land itself. It's because God chose this land.
Sure. The land did not begin to flourish until he brought his people back.
That's right.
So you see, it's kind of poetic because it shows that it's not creation that makes Israel great; it's the Creator.
Bingo. Well said. Period. End of sentence.
Mhm.
But
What do you think, Gav? Gav is gone.
at the end of the day, it really is. It's just a spiritual battle. Because if the Muslims can maintain their mosque, then Islam is true. If Christianity were to win and build a church, then Christianity is true. But ladies and gentlemen, if the third temple gets built,
It's all
else,
over.
everything else was just a lie.
And we already know it was. And is.
Yep.
Imagine one day the temple was erected, the Kohen Gadol is placed, the Mashiach is chosen, and like everyone looked in bafflement of Israel. Like,
You have no clue.
and
It's
it's funny because like, who 300 years ago would say that Israel would be standing there? Who in their right mind, will say, you know, the Jews will not only have a state, but they will have this small little piece of land that will be surrounded by people who want to destroy it, and they
They
will
know that, Mike.
survive.
They already know that.
Yeah. I'm saying, like, imagine 300 years ago if somebody said that.
yeah, prime candidate for the nut house, right?
No,
Exactly.
you know what they would have said? They attacked us, we won, let's eat. Boom. Like they say now. They tried to kill us, we
It's
beat
a
them.
miracle. Yeah, and it's a miracle that they survived, that Israel is standing today. It's a complete miracle because in the time of Nazi Germany, no one would have expected this to happen. In the time of the Middle Ages, when the Jews were spread out throughout the world, no one would have, in their right mind, said, you know what, the Jews will create one day a state that will be small, but will be extremely powerful, extremely resilient, that will defend itself against a bunch of enemies around it, and they will thrive. No one in their right mind would have said that in the Middle Ages. And here we are.
But if you look at it in some certain circles, what is the real name of planet Earth?
Depends on what language and what
Israel.
people think that.
Absolutely.
Who?
For another time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's getting kind of late, man. I need.
Yep.
It's after midnight.
Right.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, here it's 2:25.
I got 125. Yeah. But it's like
2:25 here.
Ross, did you
I
listen to
need
the
to be
Zechariah
up
thing?
at 9.
Mike's Zechariah.
Yep.
Yes, I did, and I'm going to go back and do it again. I was absolutely dancing.
Oh, it was awesome. I've listened to it twice now. It was awesome.
Yes.
So, okay, gentlemen, on that note, Gav, you want to turn this off?